How complimentary is
Right.
it? This meeting of the Winchester School Committee to order at 6:09 p.m. And we'll have public comment and all that stuff following the welcome reorg and an appointment of a new staff member. Welcome to Tim Matthews. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hackett for reorganization.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. So tonight is, by your policy, is the night that you would be reorganizing. And as you know, last 2 years, actually, you have chosen to not reorg until after the town meeting. So getting a little feedback on the speaker over there.
Push your mic out like 3 or 4 through you. See if that
Like the
okay.
table back there.
Like this?
That may work.
Okay, I'm good. And so it's up to the committee as to how you want to move forward, whether or not you actually want to follow past practice and delay your reorganization until after town meeting so that the chair, who has been doing the work with the budget and the FinCom and the town, can actually be presenting the budget at Springtown meeting. So what is your pleasure?
I would make a motion to delay policy BDA around reorganization and continue with our current chair and current vice chair until the first meeting after the conclusion of town meeting.
First regular meeting.
First regular meeting after the conclusion of town meeting.
I have a motion on the floor. Just for a second.
Friendly amendment.
Is there
Can we say
discussion?
First regular meeting.
I said
after-
regular.
Speech you did.
Oh,
First
sorry.
regular meeting.
Sorry, yeah.
Yes.
Was that a second?
Second.
All right. Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes. I return the mantle back to
right.
Mr. Hopcroft.
Also, thank you, everyone. All right, so the next item, before we get to public comment, is we have consideration of appointment of Marlena, please, Islagas?
Isalgas.
Isalgas, thank you very much. Our new Director of Special Education. Maybe I'll turn it over to Dr. Elon.
Yeah,
Dr. Hackett, do you want to take
certainly.
it
No,
first,
I'll
then
take it.
Dr.
Actually, would you be willing to come to the table just because we can have you on microphone for all the crowd at home? And I am going to turn this over to Dr. Elanema because I think there are few people happier than her. Because the future is now that she can begin to see a transition away from being the acting special education director. So, Dr. Elanema.
Thank you. As much as I have loved this exciting journey. So we are super excited. We had a great team, very diverse, that went through the process. All the different roles in the district were represented on the team, and as well as members of the WinPAC and school committee. And we did a lengthy process. Thank you for hanging in there, Marlena. We did, initial screenings, then we did a full, long interview, and then Marlena came and did a fabulous professional development for the committee, and then Frank did reference checks. So through the whole process, it became abundantly clear that Marlena was the clear candidate for us, and she comes with a lot of experience, but I'll let her tell you about herself. But yes, I am personally super excited, but also because of who Marlena is. Both her experience, her approach, her temperament is just exactly what we think will be a great fit here, and we're super excited, so thank you.
Thank you so much for that very complimentary introduction, and I'm grateful to have been selected. I'm honored to be the finalist here, so thank you so much. Just a little bit of background about me. I started off my career as a special educator at the Landmark School, supporting students with language-based learning disabilities. I've worked as a special educator as well at the Wheeler School in Providence, Rhode Island, supporting students with diverse needs, both identified with disabilities and without. I then made a transition into more of an administrative capacity at Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts, where I was the associate director of the Learning Center and was again supporting students who had been identified with learning differences, in addition to students who were at risk for a successful transition to the academy due to prior preparation and many other factors. And for the last 8 years, I've been working for the Lawrence Public School District. I'm the senior special education director there, and so I am overseeing special education compliance citywide, also supporting staff and working to move forward our vision for inclusive practices. So I'm super excited to be here and to continue this excellent work in a community that values academic excellence and is deeply committed to inclusion. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And can I ask Marlena one more time? Tell us how to pronounce her last name again?
E. Salges.
Isalgas. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Great, well, do we have a motion to?
I was going to say, as a school committee member who was part of the interview team, I'm happy and thrilled to make a motion to appoint Ms. Isalgas as the Director of Special Education for Winchester Public Schools. And again, just as sitting in the interviews with Dr. Ellen Emmett and the team, it was just so exciting to see how you were able to reach out and engage everyone in the room and recognize differences in adults and their learning style and their communication style, and I'm sure you will bring that to our students in the district here as well. So I'm happy to make the motion.
I'm happy to second that, but I want to second it with thanks to the screening committee and the administration who worked so hard. This is, this can be a tough job, but it's also, I think, a tough job to fill. So thank you to everybody who participated in the process.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 That's unanimous. So congratulations, Ms.
you.
Isalgas.
Yes.
Yes. We won't make you stay for the whole meeting. You're welcome to, of course, but I think I speak on behalf of all the committee members to say that I do look forward to sitting down and getting to know you a little bit better over time. We're really, really excited to have you in particular, but certainly have this role filled. It's a very important role in our district.
I do have one logistics question. We may have some public watching. Start date is when?
Effective July 1, but I believe there might be.
Tomorrow, just one day.
I'm glad I said it out loud for the record now. Yeah, so
Yes.
the superintendent, interim superintendent in Lawrence actually, and I had a great conversation around just what a wonderful human being she is, but also that he is very agreeable to whatever transition that we can work out or feel that we can do, and in turn, shared with him that if there are things that after July 1 that she has to attend to in Lawrence just because of timelines, that we're certainly flexible on that as well. So we'll start that process of conversation now, and but effective July 1. So don't. So she does not have an email account.
There'll be an email.
Yeah, she has no email account from Winchester at this point.
This is why I asked the question.
It's a great
Yeah.
question. Thank you. And beyond just, we won't make you stay, we'd like you to not stay, because
Okay.
you're the kind of person who probably would stay
I totally
unless
would.
you're kicked out. You should hit the road,
Start thinking
get some
about the
sleep.
transition.
Thank you very much, Liz.
Warm welcome, and I'm really excited to start. Thank you so much.
Great to have you.
Thank you. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all.
All right, with that, we will move on to public comment. Public comment, as a reminder, is for a period of 20 minutes. Any citizen wishing to speak before the committee shall identify themselves by name and address and shall speak for no longer than 3 minutes. No citizen may speak for more than once without permission of the chair. Public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between citizens and the committee. It's a citizen's opportunity to express their opinion on issues of school committee business. Before I ask about our timekeeper and whatnot, do we know if anyone has signed up?
I did not see anyone signed up, but there are.
Oh,
Okay,
wait,
there you
okay.
go.
So we have one person. So, Ms. Bolognese, would you keep
Sure.
time for us? Please join us.
Hello again.
Welcome.
My name is Hillary Eaton. I live at 5 Dean Road. I have a 4-year-old, nope, a 5-year-old. She just turned 5. I have a 5-year-old at Vincent Owen, and I have a 6-year-old at Morocco. And I guess I am the lone literacy commenter tonight for public comment. I think we all know by now that this is an issue that sort of Winchester cares about a lot. There's a process underway. And one of the things that's been on my mind, I think, as we had April vacation week and just coming out of some of the updates from past meetings, is that, you know, when I log into Parent Square, I see pretty much a weekly, if not a twice weekly update from my kids' teachers, talking about sort of like what they did in class, what they learned, giving ideas for ways that we can provide consistency with that learning and reinforce things at home. And I'm guessing I don't actually know, but I'm guessing one of the reasons that came to be a practice is because, you know, you get a lot of redundant questions from parents who have, you know, concerns or questions around sort of what did my kid do this week, or they came home with a new phrase and I don't know what that phrase means. Can somebody, you know, update me? And it occurred to me that then when I contrast that with at least what I'm aware of, which may not be the entire world of what exists in terms of communication around literacy, I see a January 26th message from Dr. Hackett talking about the fact that literacy is clearly an issue and that something's being done about it. And then I see something about a month ago saying that there was going to be a design committee put together and offering for people to apply. Aside from that, these meetings and then PTA meetings, which I would kind of make a note that sort of getting here by 6 p.m. in traffic is clearly a somewhat difficult thing to do when you're a working parent. Making it to PTA meetings, if you have a 9 to 5 or a 9 to 9 job, is often kind of difficult depending on where they're timed. So the ability to get information about what's going on with some of the various processes can be a little bit difficult. Sometimes what ends up happening is it ends up being word of mouth or Facebook groups. I mean, you know what happens with phone trees. Often the message kind of changes along the way, right? Or people's biases or interpretation of what happened is inserted. And so one of the things, you know, I know this is not a debate or a request or a forum, but just, you know, putting this to the committee, that having some form outside of this meeting, which somebody has to either log into or watch post hoc and kind of try and extract updates from, aside from PTA meetings, like it'd be a great idea to have sort of like, I mean, I don't know, what is the cadence? Is it once a month? Is it every couple of weeks? Can you look at sort of the cadence of that design committee meeting and come up with a suitable sort of, here's a nice way to provide updates, even if that update is, there is no update. But right, it would be nice to have an email that kind of says, hey, thank you to the however many people applied for the committee. We've finished the process. We formed the committee. They had their first meeting, right? Not a lot of those updates have happened, and that's partly because there are breaks in the committee schedule, et cetera, et cetera. So just kind of a note that like when we think about sort of communication, building trust between the community and the committee and a select board, et cetera, that would be sort of like maybe a nice way, and it may avoid.
I was going to say, time.
Time.
But,
cool.
But
Awesome.
Please finish, feel free to
Well,
finish
since
your
there's
thought.
nobody else, yeah, look, my 2 cents would just be sort of like some commitment to regular communication via email, which parents can check no matter what their busy schedule looks like, could be a nice way to avoid you guys getting what I think might be sometimes a deluge of very similar emails from people who are concerned about this issue. So that's my spiel today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eaton.
Is it possible to add a comment that I didn't sign up for?
Yeah.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Shannon Stott. I'm at 32 Pilgrim Drive. I have 3 children in the Winchester Public School System, 1 at McCall, 2 at Vincent Owen. Today, some of you may know I'm a member of WinPAC. Today, I'm just simply speaking as a parent of children, but specifically, I'm speaking as a parent who participated in the language-based survey 2 years ago. So our family deeply engaged in that survey process, where we did interviews, we had our children observed, and I'm excited that we're having an additional survey and assessment being done, and I just want to remind folks as well that we have the output of that first survey that was put together, and making sure that as we look towards having another and working on building that trust, for those of us that actually put ourselves through that process and we're asking parents to do it again, making sure we're communicating what have we done in response to the survey that's already in hand. If you want to know, it's a standing meeting topic at WinPAC. We have a document that has an 88-line item of things that were identified. We don't expect the district to do every one of the things. It was very extensive. But it would be really great for those that have been through this process once before to know, can we increase communication about what things have been done and things have been done, while also making sure as we're asking parents to trust to go into this process again, to give additional feedback, to make sure that we have a communication pipeline, we have some level of transparency and accountability as we go forwards to that. So that was just my request. I'm excited for the new director of special education to be in place and to think of all the things that we will continue to do together. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Dodd. All right, seeing no one else here for public comment, I will close public comment at this time, and we'll move on to superintendent remarks.
So on the posted agenda, the elementary literacy update was actually accidentally located under the consent agenda. It should be under superintendent and chair student remarks. So, Mr. Mayor, could you go to, can you just go to the website, our website? Go actually to the homepage to show the progression. So here's our homepage website. We are launching today. It will be out tomorrow through Parent Square. Andrew, if you go up to the top and you go to departments, you'll see scrolling down elementary literacy study. And this page, as you scroll down, has information about the study and has the overview of the study. This is the design, and then as you go further down, if you just click on that link, you'll see those are the design team members. And then as you go further down, you'll see design team updates. So the first and only meeting of the design team was held. That link that says meeting update is a link to meeting notes from that meeting that were released by the design team. And then you'll see teacher survey, which says it's under development, is being piloted, but I'll share with the committee and the public tonight that the window for the teacher survey is going to be May 2nd, first, second-ish through the 10th, but we're going to take, on May 7th, we have department, and we have, faculty meetings after school. So we're carving out 30 minutes, which is the approximate time they're estimating for the teacher survey, to allow teachers to be able to fill that survey out during their workday. But it will be open longer than that if they would rather do it some other time. And if you go one further down, the parent survey is also under development and being reviewed. We don't currently have from the collaborative right now, we don't currently have a window, but likely shortly within, after the teacher survey has been put out and completed. And then the teacher listening sessions, those dates are not yet final, but those are the dates that the collaborative researchers will actually be here and holding sessions at each one of the schools. These will be in person, and the schools have already arranged their schedules to allow each grade level to have time with the researchers during the school day. I think around a half an hour or so has been allocated for that. Those are obviously voluntary, but the time is going to be available. And then the family listening sessions now have been, we're publishing now in real time. We'll put this out tomorrow. And they also have a registration link. So because I can't see, let me just call it up on my computer, but there's a combination of sessions. So there'll be in person on Monday, May 20th. There's a registration link for that. That will be 6:30 to 8 o'clock, trying to provide a little bit more extra time for people to get in from wherever it is they're traveling from their jobs. And then on Tuesday, May 21st, that's an in-person session too. These sessions are both the same. So you don't have to go, you can pick one. They are just opportunities for parents to talk to the researchers during those sessions. So you don't have to go to all of them. They're going to be the same. And then you see online on Zoom, just provided some additional opportunities for people who may not be able to get in person. Again, the same time frames, 3:30 to 5 on May 28th, and then 6:30 to 8 on May 28th. So registration links are live. We'll put this out through Parent Square tomorrow, directing people here. This page will be updated regularly. The updates will come from the design team to us. We will then post them here. So that information flow is going to be determined by the design team and the work that's happening with the collaborative. So we're excited to launch this page. I feel like it's timely based on the public comments, and which were fair comments, but, we are in place now. And again, the design team has had one meeting, and it's underway. So happy to answer any questions or try to answer any questions of the committee.
Well, and just a reminder also that we do have elementary literacy update as a standing committee item at our meetings as another opportunity for people to learn about what's going on. So we expect that to have on our agenda through the report.
And you just heard it tonight.
That's,
That was the update.
that's the exact example of it.
I would just
In
add, those
practice.
dates you just reviewed, that's about as early as we could do this with the community, given we're about to open Springtown meeting.
Right.
Yes.
And how many nights it's
Right.
likely to go.
Right.
And especially extended debate on financial issues, including our own
Our
school
own
budget.
budget.
So
Yep.
this is going to be something we're all going to really be focused on, and we'll breathe a sigh of relief. And I'm happy to hear what people think the odds are on a 4 or 5 night town meeting, but.
Hopefully, we don't have to cut the funding for the website, because that would be so disappointing to have done all that work.
I'm
and then
just
have
going to
take it
say,
down.
if May 20th has to be postponed because we haven't closed town
Oh.
meeting, I will have pulled the last of my hair out, but, you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
I think this is a good schedule.
I think, yeah,
Appreciate it
hopefully,
very
and I
much.
hope it's flexible for people, so.
And Dr. Hackett, you said this is going out on Parent Square
We'll send
tomorrow?
this out on Parent Square tomorrow with a couple other updates and some of the stuff you'll hear tonight. I wanted to give this to the committee first before we send it out to the public. So,
Okay.
It's exciting to see the progress.
It
So
is.
thank you very much for all the hard work.
Well,
And to you, Andrew Marin.
it's good to have it underway.
All right, so I'd like to say that, public comment is not a back and forth. I appreciate the responsiveness, it's very quick.
Just, if Shannon had not got up and spoken, I wouldn't have had it done in time, so thank you. I do have a couple other things under superintendent remarks. If Mr. Marin can go to slide 5, and I'm going to let him speak to slide 5, 6, and 7. He's like, well, first of all, let me just say, okay, I got to ride in it today. I couldn't touch anything. Like, I had to sit in the passenger seat, he wouldn't let me touch anything, but it is really, I'll let you continue.
I got to sit in the driver's seat.
It's impressive, wow, well, you're on the school committee, so.
I didn't get to drive in it.
Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening. So if you recall, I think it was maybe last summer, we discussed replacing our existing diesel van that's used for food service deliveries and carting supplies around town with an electric vehicle. Around August, September, we entered the procurement and ordered it, and it took almost until now to fulfill it, just with the supply chain, everything involved with it. But it's here, it's parked out back. On the loading dock, the van, when we purchased it, it came with included a charger, so that's been installed. It's hooked up to the power supply here at the high school. So the van itself is a 2023 Ford E-Transit. And you can see just this morning, we took a picture with all the folks from our culinary team at the high school. And they're very excited to use it. And it should be starting to go around town next Wednesday. So that's when we transition out from the old van and send it back to the dealership and start this one, so.
Andrew's done a ton of work on this, so I just want to thank him for it. In fact, has been providing support for other school systems as to how he went through this process and how he did it. I will say that he gave me a couple looks at the branding, which he designed himself, as the logos, and I gave him some feedback, and I did give him one piece of feedback, and I'm just going to say publicly that I'm very disappointed because it says 0 emissions, and I suggested 0 emissions, 100% nutrition, but it didn't make it.
I went out.
Just for the record, I'd like to point out that that was an omission, I think, so, but we're very, it's great to have, and it's, we have the only all-electric vehicle in town at this point, I believe.
We were the first, and now DPW does have a Ford Lightning for their facilities manager.
Nice.
And we're also the first all-electric van that Whitson's has, right?
Correct, yep. Yeah, throughout their organization, they haven't had one yet.
So,
And Andrew was kind enough to offer opportunity to go see it, so I never pass up show and tell. So it is out back, if anybody wants to stop by on our way out. Has some really thoughtful features in it, I think that the staff is going to really appreciate. And Andrew did let me sit in the driver's seat, and the thing that I think is remarkable about that is I am 5'0", and I could see over the steering wheel and drive that thing comfortably, so if I can do it, any of our staff can do it. So it's really a really nice product, and I think it's going to really benefit the nutrition department and make even delivery of food and things easier. So besides the awesomeness of our goal of trying to be, net zero in the district, it's nice to be able to have that available.
yeah, I was going to add that it's not lost on me that this represents our entire fleet. And while it looks like 3, it's only 1.
That part.
But yes, our one diesel van is now going to be an electric vehicle. And it feels like there's a bit of a theme or something with, our all-electric net zero building being built, including the electric bus option in the RFP, although that was cost prohibitive still. But I appreciate all of the leadership in the district, and thank you, Andrew, for making this happen. It's a more enjoyable, more modern, healthier option, and so I think it's great.
2 questions.
Thanks.
So the existing van has been available to the district just for other purposes, not just Whitson. So we move furniture around special events and what have, and equipment. That's still the case, I'm assuming, yes?
Yeah, that's a separate vehicle. So,
Yeah,
and
That's
that's
a
a,
separate.
That's the one that,
Yeah.
kind of like Fred Flintstone.
I was going to say, that's the
Like it's had
Flintstone
a hole in
vehicle.
the floorboards that,
But that's the only.
It is-
vehicle in
it
our
is-
fleet.
it-
That's like an
it-
E350 van, it's diesel, and
yeah, so this van has been specific to Whitson's only, at least through our Whitson's contract.
so then, just so we're clear, we're not exactly replacing that van with this one. This is a van
No, we
for
are.
a different specific.
If you go out back, you see the old Whitson's van
no, he's
alongside
talking,
it, that's a
no, he's
different
talking
vehicle.
about.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
a district.
Oh,
van.
you're saying we now have 2 vehicles in our
I think
fleet?
That's what I'm hearing. because
I don't
when
like to
Andrew-
talk about
correct,
the
yeah.
other one, but,
Our fleet
Yeah.
is larger than we thought.
When Andrew says return it to the dealership, I thought we bought it, right? So we don't need
Right.
to surplus it?
No, so this van that's replacing is the lease vehicle through Whitson's, and they own it.
Oh,
And so the other van is the pony van for our internal courier service we
Yeah.
have. Yep, and that still exists, that's parked at DPW.
up to this moment, I thought
Yeah.
the electric van was replacing.
The pony
our
van.
that one does need to be replaced, but
It
this was the
does.
easiest one to do financially at this
So maybe
point.
can we have a conversation about that being?
He's ready to do it right now. He's got the PO ready to go. So, I mean, yes.
Okay.
do
Funding
that.
it to look at.
Yeah,
This
well,
was purchased through our revolving account, food services, it's self-funded there.
Okay.
The other van, we'd have to look at how to approach that.
How to fund it.
Yeah.
right.
Gotcha.
And operation.
There's also, we're also applying for rebates, so we can get up to maybe $15,000 back. That would go back to the food service account now that we purchased this, and apply through the state and the federal government for it.
Okay.
Nice.
Cool.
So in a way, Mr. Hopcroft, this is a doubling of our.
That's what he
I
said.
know. I didn't realize that either, so thank you for that, for making that clarification. But it just says there's more work to be done.
Yes.
Yes. But it is a hand crank van, so we still have,
Maybe the electric one can push the other one.
yeah,
I'll just,
Hybrid
yeah.
fleet.
I'll add to it, does
in the
have some
aggregate.
good safety features where if you back up the van, it gives you a 360 of your surrounding with cameras, so if there's any students around, so it's greater clarity into that. And it has a lift gate that folds inside, so
Yeah.
if we're lifting these heavy Cambros up and down, which we have to do now, and now we can
And
use it on
you
the
said
lift gate.
insulated, Andrew, too?
What's that?
It's insulated as
It's
well?
insulated as well, yep. So as we transport things, hot or cold.
Oh,
So we're excited.
Nice. Anything else up your sleeve?
Just, no, many of you were at this, and some of you spoke at this. So just a quick picture, as you recall, and it wasn't too long ago, we did have the groundbreaking ceremony for Lynch. And on the next slide, just to give you a little bit of an update, the steel is going up quickly. And I think, when were these pictures from, Andrew?
Just last week.
Just last week?
Yep. So this is steel going up, and also all the utilities for water and sewage going in.
So, making huge progress. And then finally, Andrew, why don't you go ahead and just,
Sure. So we also spoke, I think maybe over the summer, about investing in security cameras in the district. We had a few schools that were without cameras. So McCall, Lincoln, Morocco now have cameras within their schools. And we took an approach. So what's pictured there is a multi-sensor camera. So you pay for one camera license, but then this has 4 lenses on it. So at McCall, we have 24 physical devices, but it gives us about 51 views or lenses. And same with, I think, Morocco, it's about 10 cameras. It gives us about 24 views. And Lincoln is 11 cameras. That gives about 30 views. And so it's a combination of single sensor and up to 4 kind of per device. Yeah. So you can put it on the corner of a building, get 270 degrees with 3 lenses there.
and just to clarify, these cameras, like at the high school, are in hallway spaces and outdoor. They are not monitored, with the exception of the ones that are on our entry points for admin assistants to be able to see who's coming in, to let them in, to buzz them in. They're not in instructional spaces, and generally, when they have been used, for example, at the high school, and there's been a few occasions the last few years where there's been an incident that's something, and then, we're able to pull up some video to see a bit more clearly what might have happened. So they're really kind of a safety element, but they're not, I don't want people to think we have staffing that sits and watches and monitors these cameras all day long. That's not the case, other than the front entries.
And these are also networked with public safety should they need to access them?
Correct, yep.
Yeah. So in terms of who's monitoring them.
And yeah, and so
If they need to be turned over.
we were the first kind of move to upgrade our cameras, so we chose this system. And the last point here, it's a proprietary spec for Lynch, so it'll be on the same system. And then the towns, so Town Hall and the police and the library are now migrating to the same exact system as well. So across the board, it's going to be stored separately, and everyone has access to their data, but it's the same platform and same management support for it.
And can I just add, we also actually have a camera at Lynch right now, so just for monitoring construction, and that's pretty closely monitored, and if there's
Yep.
an issue, so police can respond as well.
And then just the last point, we have existing schools that had existing cameras, and so those will be migrated by the end of the school year to the same system. So it'll be all one system, and everyone will be trained on it and how to use it. That was it. for
That's
my
it.
update.
Anything else from you?
For me.
All right. So a couple updates in the chair remarks. The school committee just recently held an off-site norms workshop with our new member and our existing members to really, establish the norms and get to know each other better and so on and so forth. The Mass Association of School Committees Day on the Hill is coming up on May 6th. I know Ms. Sharawat and Ms. Bolnese and Ms. Bergstrom are planning to attend. If others are interested, just contact Erin Allen and let her know. WinPAC meeting is on May 13th at 9 a.m. on Zoom, and that's open to the public. And as Mr. Nixon noted, town meeting begins on April 29th. The school budget, of course, won't be taken up until May 2nd or after, as it's a financial article. But to remind.
Actually, it's the following Monday.
The 6th? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
first
you.
Monday in May, not first day in May.
Okay, I'm just reading my notes, but but yeah, no, thank you for the
Lots of
correction.
rules.
Thanks for the correction on that. And just a reminder to the community that town meeting only votes the school budget bottom line, not the individual line items on the budget. Are there other updates that committee members want to add?
Can I just say, although we did publicly recognize Tim Matthews in our first meeting, which was virtual, and because of connection problems, you weren't there, so you had to take our word for it that we welcomed you.
I also
Now that
learned
you're
that you
here,
have to have two Zoom
now that you're
links
here,
for
I'd
executive
like to
session on
welcome
Zoom.
Tim Matthews to the table.
Absolutely.
So we recognize you twice. So welcome.
Thank you. Welcome.
A lot of good things were said when you weren't there,
I-
just so you know.
I mean, I did watch
You could
that.
play, okay, all right.
I
all
did
right.
watch that very long, publicly posted recording on WinCam of the 3 minutes you all spent on Zoom without me.
It was a marathon session.
Sorry, must have been embarrassing.
I would, Mr. Chair, if I may, make one point about Lynch, since we just saw construction. Given that we're going into town meeting, there has been some information shared, some press releases, I think last month, are on the subject of additional MSBA reimbursement for the Lynch project. So I guess on behalf of the EFPBC, just wanted to share, we are actually still waiting on a confirmed, a revised reimbursement number. It will go up. I think we shared this with town meeting last round. I know we've discussed at the school committee. The board did have a second vote where they raised the construction cost cap limit for construction. So they did not change our reimbursement rate, our percentage, but they changed the very basis that our percentage is applied to. So that's good news. We will get additional reimbursement. But that reimbursement is always calculated on what they call eligible expenses. So there's some scope that by category is ineligible. There are cost limits for certain elements for eligibility. Some are limited by square footage. Some are limited like site. I think they increased the percentage to 10% of the overall project cost. The board's vote, although welcome, affects 39 projects where it's us plus 38 others, and there's just a tremendous amount of work the MSBA is going through. They have told us it typically takes 140 days before they actually have a number for us, which would actually put us out into June. They know that we're opening town meeting soon. They know we would love to be able to share that number, and they're working hard on it, but we just don't have that number yet. But when we get it, we will share it, and it'll be good news, because at the end of the day, there'll be just less long-term borrowing for us. We're just not prepared to quantify that yet.
And Mr. Nixon, last night, the town manager also said, the town manager also said that the entire cost of the solar project is now included in the Lynch project?
Almost, but not quite. So there is an article on the warrant put forward by the select board, which I presume the EFPBC will support. If you remember from last town meeting, I think it was Articles 18 and 19 that gave the board authority to choose to go into a power purchase agreement or direct purchase, depending upon how the bids came in. The direct purchase option allowed for up to, I think it was $300,000 of free cash plus additional long-term borrowing. The great news is the bids came in sufficiently low enough that we were able to pay for most of the solar with the project budget we had, but we still needed a little extra to get us over the hump, if you will. So Beth Rudolph, her recommendation to the board was, we'll give them the free cash. We felt we could make up the difference. So that, hopefully that will be explained to town meeting. There is an article in the warrant to rescind the borrowing authorization. We're still getting the solar, but we only need to take the free cash for it. And that is actually a perfect example of what takes the MSBA so long, because we can include that in the project, but we expect not to get any reimbursement for that, because that's beyond the original project's scope. That's okay, so long as we have, in this case, adequate resources, because the budget came in sufficiently low. We still need to, because this is early days, we're just getting out of the ground, pay attention to our contingency, because unexpected things can happen. Any contractor or architect will tell you the two biggest risks in a project are getting out of the ground, which in Winchester is a big deal with our issues with water. Now we're out of the ground. The next big sort of milestone is topping off, which I think Dr. Hackett, we're still looking to find a way to incorporate the students in that. That's literally placing the last beam. And then, I mean, if you think it's going fast now, it's just going to fly.
Thank you.
Anything else from members? All right, Ms. Sharawat is unable to join us, and Ms. Jen's tennis match is running over, and so she may be a little bit late joining us, but we will move on from the student remarks. So the next item is our consent agenda. And as Dr. Hackett noted, the last item, elementary literacy study update, was delivered during his remarks. So I guess I could, maybe I'll read through these because there's some great appreciation here. Consideration of acceptance of $9,975 in grants from WIFI, the Winchester Foundation for Educational Excellence. Consideration of acceptance of $7,783.90 donation from Vincent Owen Parents Association for a teacher's room. Consideration of acceptance of $2,567.94 for memorial bench honoring Mary Wolf, a longtime McCall nurse. Consideration of acceptance of $500 grant from the Enka Society for the Winchester High School Combat Robotics. Consideration of approval of minutes for March 19th, and consideration of disposal, there's another one after that, disposal of surplus technology, and consideration of authorizing the school committee chair to prepare and present the spring town meeting report. Is there a motion?
Motion
I have
to-
a request to pull the minutes, just because there's one edit on them I want to propose, but other than that,
Okay,
I'm
so
good with the consent agenda.
there are a revised motion for all but the minutes.
Can I ask just a quick question? Sorry, Karen. Is it a substantive change, Mr. Nixon? Because I'd
It's
like.
money, it's an easy thing to catch, but it's money. That's why I
Okay,
just want to
can
fix
we approve it if it's just a notation? So it's just March 19th minutes, and I'd like to be able to publish them for the community.
Yeah, I think if we can do the consent and then just pick up the minutes, I can just describe the edit, and then we can approve
Okay.
the minutes. That's all.
Yeah. Or do I just approve the whole thing with the edit?
I just.
Is it just
let's-
changing a dollar
Is
figure?
that changing a dollar?
I think it'd be appropriate to pull the
Yes.
minutes out, do
Okay.
the remainder of
Just
the
one foot and then the
consent,
other, that's it.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we
Yeah.
get to
So the
it.
motion can be made for the edit.
Yeah.
Is there
Right.
a motion for the consent agenda minus the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, consent agenda is approved minus the minutes. So now let's.
And if
talk
I
about the
may,
minutes.
the minutes from the 19th, page 2, just describing the gymnasium, high school gymnasium project, that's actually coming up on the warrant, Article 34. Page 2 just says, "The select board voted to support the gym reconfiguration encumbering 1.4 million in ARPA." That is correct. And 1.3 million for construction. That should be 1.2, because then that adds up to the 2.6 in the next line. So $1.2 million is the delta. That's all.
So is there a motion to make that change?
Approve the minutes. I make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, and thank you for helping us through that process. All right, so that brings us to reports, updates, and action items, and the first of those is consideration of town meeting warrants. Before town meeting, the school committee considers articles that, either we've been asked to support or co-sponsor, or that we expect we might be asked our position during town meeting. The anticipated articles are 9, 10, 26, 19, and 34. This represents 3 articles which are the select board is seeking support, and they relate directly to district operations. And I thought I would just read through this as part of the agenda, and then we'll go back and talk about these. So the first 2 are Articles 9 and 10 that are required for the town to approve to move the question of the CPA. There's also another select board item, 26, regarding Lynch traffic improvements. Then there's one Article 19 regarding an update to the facilities master plan, for which the committee identified a need, and Mr. Nixon has worked collaboratively with the FPBC to put forward. There's also a capital article, number 34, to refurbish the high school gymnasium that Mr. Nixon has worked with the capital committee to put forward. So I believe we have presenters here.
Just to clarify,
yeah.
actually, that's select board, not capital.
Oh,
Gym, high school gym.
high school gym?
Yeah,
Was that a select board one? All right.
It's
That's
not a
select board.
joint article?
not capital.
Okay.
Well, so we have 2 members of the
That's my
select
mistake.
board.
Thanks
here.
to the board members who saw fit to apply $1.4 million in ARPA money, it's not going through capital.
So I would invite Mr. Bettencourt and Ms. Brady, if you want. We have a witness table over here for you.
Raise your right hand.
And we'll ask the questions, okay?
I'll mention.
Yes.
I'll mention for, just for the community, I know Ms. Pryor is at the FinCom meeting now. She's hoping to come over here afterwards. So depending on the timing, I know she's presenting the Lynch one, but if she's not here, hopefully you guys can cover that as well. But maybe we start with the 9 and 10 and the CPA, and given that logistic, maybe we go to the high school gym next, and then the Lynch traffic, so that gives her the most time to get here if she wants. Excellent.
Thank you.
Floor is yours.
Thank you, Tom, and to the school committee and superintendent. Welcome to Dr. Matthews as well. It's my first school committee meeting since you've been on board, so nice to see you. Articles 9 and 10 are part of the CPA effort. As many of you know, the Article 9 piece of it is really the enabling legislation that town meeting will vote whether or not to put it on the ballot in November for a town-wide election. And that will be, our recommendation is a 1.5% surcharge on taxes for residents that will go into a CPA fund for the benefit of affordable housing, historic preservation, open space and recreation as well. So I don't know if you want to go over the Article 10 at all, it's just as an overview.
So Article 10 is the bylaw that creates the committee who would manage sort of the projects that were receiving CPA funding and how that's done. So the bylaw is fairly standard compared to the bylaws created by the other towns and cities that have adopted the CPA. There's a requirement for 5 specific members, which are Conservation Commission, Historical Commission, the Housing Authority, and the Planning Board, as well as the Parks Commission, if we have one, which we do not. And then up sort of between 5 and 9 members. So the study committee that had been meeting since last fall reviewed the bylaw, the proposed bylaw, and substituted the field management committee for Parks Commission, having some similarities to what they may do or manage. And then additionally, focus on having someone who represents the Affordable Housing Trust or the Housing Partnership Board as a member of the Select Board, a member of the Capital Planning Committee, and then 2 members at large, one appointed by the Select Board and one appointed by the Finance Committee, as well as the town manager in an ex officio role. And really the bylaws kind of create and set up what the formation of the committee and what their main purpose is. Once those are passed by a town, then they go to the Attorney General to approve them before becoming part of the bylaws. So part of the process is sort of preparing what a bylaw would look like, so that should what goes to the voters for Article 9 pass in the fall, that then that committee can sort of form as quickly as possible and have plenty of time to sort of create and develop what their processes and approach are to CPA.
Great, and so this is to, for us to decide whether we want to support these 2 articles being put forward by the Select Board, and these articles are to put this on the ballot in the fall, and the relevance for us is our historic buildings and playgrounds predominantly in the school department. School committee members have questions for Mr. Bettencourt or Ms. Brady?
Ms. Brady, you said Article 9 is the ballot question, but Article 10, you're putting it forward to the town meeting now, just so that if Article 9, which then becomes a ballot question, passes, this committee can form.
Right, so.
The town doesn't vote on.
The town does not vote on
10.
On 10. 10 is voted on by town meeting, and then it just kind of gives that extra sort of range of time, should it pass in November, for the committee to be appointed and to begin meeting.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay, Mr. Johnson.
One you may be able to answer, one maybe you can't. If I can ask Mr. Mayor, just scroll up a little bit. I think I heard Mike say last night in Beth Rudolph's hearing that A through E, is that right? That's what's required by statute?
That's correct.
Okay. So a question that I have heard in the community is, why not appoint a member of FinCom rather than FinCom appoint somebody at large?
Yeah, so
Can you
that
speak
was.
to that?
Yeah, that was advised by town council that, that it be a member, that it be appointed by FinCom, but not a member of that committee, because our bylaws for FinCom state that those members cannot serve on any other elected or appointed committee. So his guidance was that it's not a member of FinCom who's placed on this committee, because it could contradict
So
FinCom bylaws.
I appreciate that. That corroborates what I had heard. I don't think I'm alone, then. I'm just wondering how it is that FinCom then has two appointments to the Capital Planning Committee, for the reason you just said. They have two appointments, one of which is supposed to be a sitting member, the other doesn't have to be.
Right.
So that's just a head scratcher for me. But if council, if Jay is saying this is the way to do it, that's helpful.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I mean, there is a conflict in the charter and the bylaw regarding that. We'll have to take that up at some point, because right now, those appointments probably aren't technically viable, but they have been our practice, and I think we would want to maintain those positions. It rose on the Capital Planning Committee from FinCom, but we might have to do some work in order to reestablish them. So
Yeah.
I think that's why, town council, taking a fresh look at things, kind of said to us, oh, you can't do this. And we're like, well, we do it.
Right.
So that's, so I think that we will need to do some cleanup somewhere along the way. But in the meantime, I think we want to be consistent here. I think that it's healthy to have committees appoint people that aren't necessarily on the committee, because this is going to be heavy lifting. FinCom is a lot of work, and especially in a small period of time. And so this would be a substantial enough position on the WCCP that it seems like it would benefit from a non-member of the Finance Committee to be representing FinCom there.
So, and just for the record, I think the FinCom voices on capital are really important, and they have been for years. So I hope there's a way to make that appropriate and legal moving forward. And if I understood, Anthony, I think I was in the car last night listening to the hearing. I think there had been a question about term expiration, because everybody's sort of starting out of the blocks at one time, and it seems like everybody's term is expiring. And I think, if I heard you right, you made a nice point about, well, if you limit some members to only a year or something, they've only
members are also members of other boards or committees, that they have terms on those committees, so there's a natural turnover within there, that their term and they may no longer be on that committee, and so somebody new would be put onto that committee. What we heard from the Community Preservation Committee? Coalition?
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of alphabets.
CPCs.
A different CPC. What we heard from them was that as a new committee, and with sort of all of the pieces in place and the bylaws in place from the state, that it can take a lot of work to get up to speed. So having shorter term limits to start wouldn't necessarily, it could be kind of disruptive if you have sort of someone there for a year and they're on the committee, and then potentially appoint somebody new who's coming in at the start of things. So the thought was that those shorter terms in the beginning may not be necessarily helpful to the committee, but certainly could look at to do a longer term, but the thinking here is that there's a lot of natural turnover, so having a term limit isn't necessarily.
My last question, which you may not be able to answer, I either heard or I saw in the chat last night, there was some reference to a former member of the select board who either has or is intending to put forward a motion to amend. I was thinking it was Article 10, but I don't know. I'm not really familiar with it. I haven't seen it. I'm wondering if you are, But you're not the proponent. And now with a quorum of the board here in the room, have you guys seen it? Have you discussed it? Do you have an opinion on it? Because surely you'll be asked about it
It's
at town
on
meeting.
the Town Meeting Members Association discussion board. It is posted there.
Okay.
We have seen it. We have not discussed it or taken a position on it at this point,
And
as a board.
And presumably you'll discuss, do you know when you will discuss that proposal?
Let's say Monday or Thursday next
maybe.
week before town meeting.
Yeah, we will, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other, Mr. Matthews?
So to follow up
Dr.
on it's really fine, you can call me Tim. So to follow up on a couple of the questions that just came up, so I guess my first question would be what the rationale of, so the Finance Committee appointment, the way I guess I'm thinking about it is that Finance Committee is an appointed board, so it would be an appointed board making an appointment to another appointed board. And I was wondering if this was a discussion point that actually came up, the sort of rationale behind that, as opposed to, say, someone who has finance experience or could contribute that to the particular, because I'm sort of thinking about the governance aspect of that, and it's a really peculiar structure to ask an appointed board to make a second-hand then appointment to another appointed board. I was just wondering if that was a topic of discussion that came up and in terms of how this was drafted or sort of how this particular structure came into being.
Well, again, it is our practice in other areas. Capital planning is, another example of that, where we've got FinCom members that are appointed in capital planning, and that's an appointed committee as well.
But I think that's,
Yeah.
because this doesn't actually limit it to a member of the committee. I think that,
Right.
so in other cases, I think what the distinction I'm drawing here is that in other cases, so for example, a member of the field management committee is that it is actually designated as a person that is on that committee to serve. But in the particular language that's used for the finance committee, it doesn't, because of this issue that Mr. Nixon just brought up, it's sort of contemplated that it might not actually be a member of the board. So the way in which that particular one is different is that it's actually an appointed board appointing potentially someone who's not on their board to serve in that role. And I guess that's where my question was. I don't know if that's something that you've even discussed or.
So that's the way the FinCom two appointments to Capital, one is of one of their members, and one is not necessarily of one of their members. So there is that sort of example or practice of FinCom appointing a non-member to other appointed committees.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it just goes to Mr. Nixon's question about sort of the ways in which this potentially has some conflict with, the way things ought to operate. I think my other question is sort of related to, I believe it's Article 37, Motion 2. Is that, and I was wondering, sort of in relationship to Article 10, whether the Select Board had yet specifically taken a vote on sort of 10 in conjunction with, because we talked about the amendment that's been posted on the Town Meeting Members Association, but also sort of Article 37, Motion 2 that's been brought by the Capital Planning Committee, and whether you've taken a position on that with 10, without 10.
We have not discussed the positions on those motions yet in our most recent meeting, so that will be at our meetings in advance of town meeting next week.
And I guess my final question would be, my final question would actually be around a hypothetical scenario. So what would happen if both Articles 9 and 10 passed, and then the voters of the town rejected the CPA question? Would we have sort of a lingering zombie committee? Is there a method to clean that up post fact after an unsuccessful election? I guess that's my last question.
Yeah, it would not, take effect at that point, or if there was concern about it, then at fall town meeting, we can have an article there to rescind the bylaw. We're not thinking that's going to happen, because we're thinking that the community is going to support this.
So as we go forward, it'd be good to focus as much as we can on school committee-related elements of this, just because we'll have a fuller debate at town meeting for sure. But are there other questions that folks at the table have? there a motion on these two?
I do have a question. So you had mentioned, Mr. Hopcroft, that the relevance to school committee was around the historic buildings, or historic buildings and playgrounds and recreational grounds. So I guess I'm just wondering if something were to come up around historic buildings or recreational spaces, then is the expectation that school committee would be represented? Or how would the opinion of school committee be passed on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the school committee is pretty well represented through, all of our capital process as well. And one of the things that it was kind of explained to us when we were working with the coalition is that the CPA is really a community preservation act, right? So like really capital C there. So where our normal capital process is top down, our requests come from departments. The requests for CPA funds actually come from the community, anyone, right? So while there is a group that is managing the process and making recommendations to town meeting, anyone can advocate at any point and submit a request, right? So that is the benefit of it. And the question that we're dealing with now and that we've been looking to other communities is how do we integrate that with the capital process, because there will be overlap between certain aspects of the capital investment. So there's certainly room for anyone to advocate for any sort of capital project, whether it be outdoor space recreation or historic preservation through one of our historic buildings, and to work with the capital process as well. It's unlikely that for the larger projects where you would see at the schools that the CPA would entirely fund the whole project. So what you see in other communities is the CPA working with other departments to kind of fund a piece of it and working together. So
as Ms. Villanese said at the beginning, I made a generalized statement that this would affect our historic buildings and our playgrounds, but I didn't mean to put words in your mouth. And if there are other points of overlap with the school committee, I welcome it from you guys, but maybe I got it right, but I didn't want to oversimplify that.
No, that's right.
We're good. Okay.
If I may, I actually have a question for the superintendent, and I just want to make, based on what he answers, I might make a suggestion to Mike and Anthea in their presentation. Dr. Agat, do you have experience in prior communities that have like a capital planning process, whatever acronym they have for it, and are also participating in the CPA? And if so, would you are those two processes that are like closely related, or are they separate?
I've had, yes, I've had experience with, in two communities that had both, and neither community had any nexus between capital planning and the CPA.
I appreciate that, and I asked that question because my sense is in different communities, it works differently. So in some communities, there is that connection, and in other communities, it's almost like a firewall. I think an important nuance is through the WCCP, is that right? That through the CPA process, that recommendation is coming to town meeting. That's correct, right?
Yes.
And people should remember that capital planning, at the end of the day, we make recommendations to the town manager. So there are articles and motions that have capital's name on it, but our job is to make a recommendation to management. So in a very sort of real, to make it kind of in a black and white sense, the approval authorities are different. And I think if there is an expectation, and I think Mike was just speaking to this a moment ago, if there is a sense or a hope that there may be, let's say, a school project at a historic building, although we keep rebuilding, we have fewer and fewer historic buildings, but on the school side, there may be a project that is advocated for at the capital table. And maybe we're a little bit short. Or with the high school gym, right? We're going for overlay money and free cash, but the select board happened to have ARPA money available. If there is an expectation that funding for certain capital projects relies on both processes, both sources of funding, I think it would be really helpful for you guys to, like, you only have 10 minutes, I get it, but to either articulate that to town meeting, or I'll be the plant and I'll ask the question on the floor so you can answer it. But I think there are some questions about that, and that is, I think, one of several questions that kind of are sort of they underpin that second motion under Article 37. I think there is a hunger to just understand how it works, because it works differently in different communities. So I think to the extent you can put that in the presentation, great, but if not, I expect that question.
Could I just make one more, point of clarification on the answer I just gave? In Winchester, what's unique also is the playgrounds are not the school playgrounds. No playground is under the control of the schools. So it is the town facilities department that is in control of the playgrounds, and obviously, we work very hard together. We're very grateful to have the funding that we were provided for the upgrades to both Lincoln and to VO. We've spent a lot of time, obviously, talking about, with many bodies, talking about the Lynch playgrounds as well. But just for clarification, it is, while I could see a scenario where the school committee might join with DPW, or school administration might join with facilities in requesting money through the CPA, likely that might go through a request through capital is another way to do it. But that would not be something that we would, that we are in control over. It would not be able to make the request on our own, is my point.
Yes.
Nor do we now.
No, nor, well, no.
We request projects now through capital,
We do.
and capital decides with the town manager and the select board and FinCom how to fund them.
In full disclosure, we have spent some money to just deal with some playground-related issues out of our rental revolving account the last 2 years, too. So we obviously trying to work together
Do our
to
own part.
provide funding.
Other questions from the committee? Is there a motion from the committee?
I was going to say,
Looking
I'm,
for a motion to recommend favorable action on Articles 9 and 10?
Yep.
I'll make that motion.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Can we discuss? Is that okay?
that's what we just did, but sure, go ahead.
I thought after you made the motion, you're
Yeah,
supposed to
go
have
ahead.
discussion, right? Okay. So I guess my question that I'd like to ask is, do we, not knowing exactly where, because it sounds like the select board is still in a place that they're sort of deciding on Article 10 and sort of, it sounds like they're,
Just, we have not discussed our
Correct.
positions on them
Right.
yet to vote them.
And
We've put forward both both
okay, so
articles.
you've not taken a position on either article, right? As of yet, officially?
We.
9 and 10,
Yeah. Did we vote them?
Yeah.
But you're the
No, we haven't yet.
proponent.
9 and 10. Oh, we did.
What?
Okay.
So
I'm sorry, can somebody just
We
clarify?
voted-
I thought you voted 9 but not 10, which is where I'm going with this. And I think what my question is whether it would behoove us to follow the select board's lead and vote favorable action on Article 9, and then knowing that we have meetings prior to town meeting, whether we then wait and vote 10 separately as a part of, sort of knowing what their direction is on that. I guess that's my, because
Your amendment to the motion?
yeah, that's why I just wanted, so I guess my amendment to the motion would be to recommend favorable action on Article 9, not precluding taking recommendation on Article 10, but maybe holding that until after Select Board has officially voted that, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Have
Is there a
other
second on-
commi-
should we-
Actually, I have a question for Mike.
Should we get a second on the motion?
Just
and
for
then
the
discuss?
purposes of discussion, I'll second that,
Yeah.
because we can at least still
Okay.
make progress on
Discuss.
Right,
this.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon.
And, yeah.
but the select board's a proponent of 9 and 10,
Yes.
correct? So,
So
Yeah.
we didn't vote 10 on Monday because we were waiting for the Committee on Government Regulations to get back to us if there were any changes. After talking with the moderator today, there are none.
Okay.
We will vote a position on Monday on Article 10. But we held off on that bylaw review because it was pending review from Government Regulations. Okay.
but that's all set,
But we don't expect an answer before Monday, so we're going to say it's all set.
okay.
We're going to vote it on Monday with whatever information we have.
But have other committees voted 9 and 10?
Yes, all other committees have voted unanimous favorable action on both 9 and 10. So Field Management, Council on Aging, who else have we been in front of? The Capital Planning Committees.
management?
Yeah, Field Management Committee, so the Housing Partnership Board, Affordable Housing Trust. So all stakeholder groups so far we will be in front of the Finance Committee, or the 9-10 will be in front of the Finance Committee, I think, on Monday at their meeting. So unless they discussed it tonight, I don't know.
So,
Oh, really? Okay. So they're the only ones that have not. They have the same policy as the school committee, where they don't vote on something when it's a matter of first impression on their agenda. So they were, after we presented on it the other day, they were waiting until their next meeting to discuss it.
Yeah.
But everyone else has voted 9 and 10 unanimously. And certainly, if there are, what is it, typical practice is, if there are amendments on the floor that come up, we haven't seen them formally yet, then those committees can recommend favorable action and have a discussion about it then on the amendments. That's typically what we would do. If there's an amendment on the floor, that our board would meet and in live session and vote on favorable and unfavorable action.
so it seems there's two options. We could either vote on 9 and not 10 and save 10 until Monday, or we could vote on 9 and 10 now, and if anything changes on Monday, we could vote to change that.
I'm happy with either. No, it was just the not knowing, because I didn't know if you were considering, a sort of any proposal of a change in the language because there hadn't been an official select board vote. So because I knew some things, as Ms. Pryor just said, were already in flight. So that was my concern, and it seems like Ms. Pryor's been able to
Allay the concern.
address that.
I mean, the only clarification I can make on that is we unanimously voted to put 9 and 10 in their form on the warrant. So, as Ms. Pryor was indicating, it really was just a function of government regulations review.
Okay.
So,
Sorry, I'm a process person.
Yeah, no, that's good.
I don't want
I
to
appreciate
interrupt
it.
you. I'm just getting in line.
Are you
Well,
good?
so are you withdrawing your motion, or are you going to?
Hold on, Chris had a
Okay.
question next.
We're still discussing.
Yeah.
So I was away during school break. I appreciate Mr. Betancourt telling me that I can find this. It's an Article 10 amendment that's been put forward. I did not realize it was here until now, so thank you for that. For the record, I have voted to support 9 and 10 at Capitol, wearing my Capitol hat. I just voted to support 9 and 10 with field management. I would just like to share for the record, because it's pretty short, former Select Board member, Mr. Goluboff, says he's bringing forward an amendment to Article 10, and there's a reason why I want to read this, which amends the bylaws to add the Winchester Committee for Community Preservation, the WCCP. It does a few things. 5 bullets. First, staggers the initial term of the 9 members so that 3 expire each year, which we just talked about. Second, it adds a member from the school committee that previously had no representation. Third is it tweaks the select board and FinCom appointments to give those 2 boards more latitude in who they choose to designate. Fourth, it clarifies procedure. It keeps the town manager in the loop instead of the WCCP going directly to municipal department heads. And the last is it clarifies a procedure. If a project qualifies for CPA, it first goes to the WCCP. So a couple of those points kind of get to my comment about like how it all works. This is interesting to me. The bullet that resonates with me is the second one. It adds a member from the school committee that previously had no representation. So I have voted twice to support this. I am largely in favor of this, but I'm really interested in knowing what the proponents think of this motion to amend, which they're going to have to talk about anyway if it's going to be submitted. So I'm actually inclined to act on the motion to amend, which is vote 9, but I would like to come back to this if the select board can sort of share with us what they think of this, only because this explicitly is addressing the school committee membership.
Mr. Nixon, I was the school committee rep to the study committee, and there are some really specific reasons why there's not a school committee member that I think Mr. Betancourt's already addressed, that many of our projects go through Capitol, and there's a Capitol rep on the WCCP, first of all. And second of all, there's only a 9-member committee. So school committee would have to remove somebody that is currently in 10, who has already been put forward as a member of 10. And I would challenge you to find who you think you want to remove to place us on that, when schools are not a bucket that the CCP is designed to directly support. So my inclination would be to support 10 tonight, 9 and 10 tonight, as all the other committees in town have done. And if the select board decides to make changes to that, we can always re-vote on Monday.
So I think there's two issues. One is the today versus Monday issue of what's going to change between now and Monday, and the second is this amendment that may come up on town meeting floor, which the question I guess I'd put to the committee is, say it comes up or say it doesn't come up, could we support 9 and 10 now, or is 10 conditional on some change in it that happens later?
But just to pile on, we will surely be asked what our position is on this amendment.
Correct.
Because it specifically calls out the school committee.
Right.
So I think Ms. Bergstrom just made a very articulate response. Having been a member of the study group, I guess I come back to the proponents of this or the select board. I would just like to hear what the select board, in no disrespect, I sort of defer to the select board on this, although I realize you guys did a lot of the work. So I get it, and we may hear from the select board exactly what you said. Again, I've already voted twice to support this. I did not understand what the detail was of this, and as I just said, we will be asked sort of our position. I think it would be good for us to hear that. I'm not down on 10. I generally support it, but I might feel better if we act on 9. If they did, and can I just ask, Mike, you be talking about this on Monday? You think? You're not sure?
So, I mean, well, we don't necessarily know amendments that are going to be coming on the floor. By what we read on social media, there are other amendments that are being proposed or suggestions that people want to make. So we always take amendments on the floor in live session, and that is how we handle them. So we will talk about it in advance. I will say that, to Ms. Bergstrom's point, the creation of Article 10 in this way was very intentional. And one of the most significant buckets there is housing. And so that having that presence of the lead housing committees, the Housing Partnership Board and Affordable Housing Trust, having a voice there is critical. So that came out of the the study group unanimously, and statutorily, it requires the Housing Authority to have representation, and the Housing Authority does a great job, but they do a very different job than what we do with the Housing Partnership Board and Affordable Housing Trust. So we kind of move on parallel tracks with the same objective. So I think that we've heard from the Housing Partnership Board and Affordable Housing Trust that that is a necessary spot for representation for them on this committee. So, and I think that the select board supports that in that way. We might also make changes on our own between now and then. I imagine that we will, in fact. But I think, on balance, this is what we put forward. We unanimously put it on the warrant. We have received unanimous support from all other stakeholder committees at this point. So that, that's essentially what we would like, but we appreciate the nuance that's being presented.
May I ask just another question? Do you two, or maybe to you, Ms. Pryor, do you have a sense of how the moderator interprets Article 10? Is she considering this a financial article?
No.
I mean, in some ways you could say it is because of what it establishes. Do we have a sense of when this would come?
It will be on May 2nd. So it's not a financial article because really the function of it is only asking us to put it on the ballot.
It's not an appropriation.
It's not an appropriation, so there's no money tied to this whatsoever. So.
Okay.
And just to clarify, the timing that you'll be talking about any, I'll just say tweaks to Article 10, is that before, like in a pre-town meeting, or is that based on a potential amendment, a hypothetical amendment from the floor?
Yeah.
Because I guess I'm just wondering if we were in our pre-town meeting, if they're in a pre-town meeting, then, well, I mean,
Sometimes
how would we know?
We get them in advance, and we have the proponent come in and, discuss it with us, and sometimes we will, make a friendly amendment based on that, and we'll negotiate that. Sometimes we don't. I mean, a lot of times there are amendments made on the floor that people, just occurs to them at the last second that they want something. Like somebody might say, no, we don't want the schools involved at all. They have too much money already, right? So so we, we're always prepared, and that's why we post, we keep our meetings open through town meeting so we can vote on amendments, favorable action to our articles. So there's a degree of uncertainty until we get into town meeting and our article is live.
May I make a suggestion just to help us move along? I'm not going to vote against 10. I'm not going to vote against 10 tonight. I don't think I'm ever going to. I've already voted for it twice. But if we were to vote yes on 9 and just wait on 10 until we learn more, the select board has a conversation, that's one path. The alternative is if we vote to support 10 as presented, knowing who has proposed this amendment and his history, he's very intentional. I assume there will be a amendment coming.
Right.
And we will be asked what our opinion is. We could entertain asking this town meeting member to come visit us at our pre-town meeting and just talk it through and help us understand it. That's also an option for us, because if we approve this as submitted, when the amendment comes, Heather Von Mering will ask Mr. Hopcroft what we think. So it could go really either way.
Right. I think there is some cleanliness to notwithstanding Dr. Matthews' motion to doing 9 and 10 tonight, because there may be people like this proponent or other proponents who may want to, our dance card may get full in that short time before town meeting. And so I put that out as a consideration for the committee, that unless we're opposed to 10, if we as a group say we like 9 and 10, but maybe we also support an amendment to it, and we're going to support all 3, well, then we could support these now and do that later.
Right.
If we're concerned with 10, then I think that's, but I'm not hearing anything from people that say they're concerned with 10. Notwithstanding the administrative things that were just resolved with the
Sounds like that's
chair.
And Mr. Nixon, I'd say I'd be careful inviting proponents of motions to be made on the floor to come to our meeting. It seems like opening a door to offer anybody who's making a friendly amendment to come address the school committee.
I would
So-
politely respond.
And I would also
That is a
say.
chair and game day decision.
Right. So I would also just offer that the person, again, this is on social media. It's not, I don't know where this amendment sits. It's not on the town meeting webpage. So I would also offer that as the representative to the study committee, I was never contacted to ask what the school's position on that would be before that was drafted. Mr. Hopcroft, were you ever contacted by this individual?
No.
So this is somebody making a friendly amendment supposedly on behalf of the schools that didn't address the schools before they made it, which seems like an unforced error to me, personally. But
For
I
the
would
record,
make.
it looks like it happened 3 days ago, too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So I agree with Mr. Hopcroft. I say we move forward with a vote on 9 and 10 tonight. I appreciate your questions, Mr. Matthews. That's glad we clarified that. And would make a motion of support for
Well,
Articles 9
We have a
and 10.
motion already on the table, so.
You have a motion and a
Right.
second. We could ask if there's
If you want to
interest in
withdraw.
withdrawing.
I can
or-
withdraw the motion
if
if that
that's
is
what
the
you'd like
pleasure
to
of the
do, I'm
committee.
fine
So
with
it
that.
sounds like we're,
My
but
pleasure.
it also sounds like, I mean, we still had the other motion on the table, or did
Yes,
that get
we do have the
withdrawn,
other
right?
motion on the
So-
table.
Do we have a motion and second on that one, too?
Yes,
I
we
think
did.
we
I know we
do.
had this
I think
one,
we
okay.
did.
Well, can we, are you comfortable
Yes.
unwinding this one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So you withdraw that?
I
Keith.
Withdraw.
withdraw the motion
To
To
amend.
amend.
previously made to amend,
Perfect.
yes.
All right. So now we're back to the original motion. Is there any other discussion? Okay, let's take a vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, and that was on 9 and 10, so that passed unanimously. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
I know Ms. Pryor is here, and I know she was going to speak to Lynch traffic, and I believe she was also available to speak to the high school. I'll let you guys duke that out if
She's here all night, just to whatever questions you have for her. So, but we're going to go. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Betancourt and Ms. Brady. You're welcome to stay
you.
or sneak out the back door.
please feel free to stay. No. Tough crowd tonight.
Tag.
Exactly. I think Chris Nixon can speak to the gym better than anybody in town.
I'm sorry, what?
I may regret offering to speak to the high school
Chris
gym.
Nixon can speak to the room
the high
gym
school
better than
gym better than
anyone.
anyone in town.
All right,
It was a compliment.
okay.
All right, so we're moving on to Article 26 regarding Lynch traffic. So, welcome, Ms. Pryor. And I don't know, Andrew, you're just pulling up the number. Okay, I didn't know if there was multimedia or not.
So I don't have the slides, though I will go over them at town meeting. I will, Lynch traffic, so you're going to see a picture at town meeting of the Lynch traffic district. And the study looked at, Tool was our engineering consultant, they looked at traffic flows and accident rates and speeds at multiple intersections on the Pond Street, Brantwood Road side of Lynch, as well as on the Horn Pond Brook Road, Royal Street, Canal Street, Middlesex Ave. And they've made recommendations on the traffic improvements. There were 3 different community outreach sessions. I think I'll list those as well when I go before town meeting, probably on the night 3. There were some concerns on Pond Street residents that there wasn't enough done to address traffic concerns. So Tool came into our meeting on Monday and provided an updated approach to Lynch traffic. Nothing changed on the Royal Street, Middlesex Ave, Horn Pond Brook Road, say that 5 times fast. Nothing changed on that side, but on Pond Street, there was a commitment to do some hardened center lines, to add some painting on the streets to indicate speed limit, both painted on the street as well as speed limit signs. There'll be some hash marks on the side of the street, wider yellow lines, I think 5 or 6 inches instead of 4. And we also asked them, they were certainly willing to put additional flashing speed signs outside of those school zone signs that you see when you're within whatever that is, 200 feet. Someone knows this better than me. And I realize one of those school district signs is not working, and right now no one is in school at Lynch, but we do need to get that fixed before the students go back to school at Lynch. So there will be flashing signs indicating the school zone speed limit, and even before that, approaching Lynch on Pond Street from both the Woburn side and the Cambridge Street side, there will be an additional flashing speed limit sign. I will have pictures when I'm at town meeting, but the select board brought forth this article to move forward with design and construction of the traffic improvements at Lynch. The funding source is a capital stabilization fund. There were dollars, the dollars are allocated to pay debt service on this project as part of the vote that was taken the same day that the Lynch school debt exclusion vote was taken. There was a vote taken to put $400,000 into capital stabilization to fund traffic improvements at Lynch. The current budget will, that fund debt service funding level will be sufficient for paying for the project, and Select Board voted favorable action on this article with the stipulation that those additional flashing speed signs be put in away from the school district's flashing speed signs and with the other updates to the traffic calming measures. And I think I'll stop there. And if there's any questions.
Committee members have questions?
I have a question. Michelle, can you just clarify, my understanding is the way that second question was on the ballot. So there's debt service involved here. And this is a question I presume we are going to continue to see year after year, correct? In terms of funding the millions that it will be, this is not seeking a lump sum payment for the work.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So it should be in the capital stabilization fund debt service, where it rolls into next year's budget, whether it's a yellow sheet motion or it's a broader debt service motion. I don't know that yet.
Okay. And I'm only asking because, to remind the committee, including our newest member, the select board voted a policy in 2018 with the sort of presumption that major school projects tend to happen because of either rising enrollment or redistricting or just more traffic, foot traffic, bike traffic, car traffic, that there is a limit to what we call the school project, and the select board policy actually says to look at intersections and roadways up to, I think it's 1/10 of a mile. There's like actually a distance to it.
I thought you'd said a quarter.
And at one point, I thought it was a quarter, but
Yeah.
maybe it is a quarter. It's a fairly, I mean, it's a significant, sort of zone. That was, so importantly, the select board voted that policy because they sort of understood the standing of the EFPBC and the school committee only can go so far. And then, that's it. That's, a project has to have a limit of construction. And so then the board said, well, so then we want to evaluate what else we can do in the area. So just in terms of lanes, this is very much a kind of select board initiative. Capital, of course, is involved for the reasons that Ms. Pryor just said, because there is a stabilization fund. So I'm going to maybe look to Ms. Bergstrom. The last time we talked about this in a very real sense was the intersection redesign in front of McCall, right? Washington and Main, and then down around the corner by the Unitarian Church.
Yep.
I don't remember if we took a position on that. There was a little bit of McCall money that was available that went towards tools design work, but I do remember the board had to go out and get additional funding to actually construct it. I just don't remember as a matter of sort of practice if we
Right.
said, because there is like a lane,
Right.
are we stepping into that other lane to say we support this, or did we deliberately say that's their stuff? I just raised that as sort of a practical observation. I mean, I support the work, and I think management's done a great job engaging with the neighborhood on both sides of the schools. I'm saying that because I'm presuming you're going to ask if there's a motion to support this. I'm just
Yeah.
not sure we've done it in the past. But it's good stuff, and I'm voting for it as a town meeting member.
Right.
If you'd told me that earlier, I wouldn't
What's
even
that?
be here.
Well, no, I was just going to say.
Traffic, I would have
I'm
like
not,
gone
the first
home.
time we did it, though, was the first time, Mr. Nixon. It was a different board and a different piece of work, too. And, I mean, I would argue that I would support, as a school committee member, any work in town that works to make getting pathways for our kids to school safer, whether it's in our responsibility or not. I would always want to vocally support safe traffic and walking paths and any article that supports that. So, I mean, I would be comfortable voting favorable action on that, but I'll let other people
Just
speak.
because
too.
I'm not raising it because I think we shouldn't. I just.
Right, I know, I hear,
We remember lanes.
I appreciate Mr. Nixon's clarification. One thing I don't think I fully appreciated until I was on the select board is that we are the street wardens of the town. So we can, maybe we can get some vests or something, but that is our job. Every curb cut, every power line that gets connected
Right.
from the street to someone's house, we have to give grants of location, crosswalks, sidewalks, speed limits. They're all select board policy. So this is very much public ways leading to a school district.
right,
Want to enforce school district limits, which are sort of state mandated. So it is firmly in select board's purview to do so. We're here tonight, I think, to just follow through on the work that select board committed to in any school project to look at traffic impacts. So fair point. You all will do whatever you'd like.
well, and to your point, Ms. Pryor, I'm not sure I'd support a curb cut, but I'd support sidewalks for our kids to get to school.
And I can also share, when we were doing the McCall work, there was a design proposal for traffic, intersection redesign.
Right.
And an opinion was expressed, I think, by the, on behalf of the school committee, by the superintendent. There actually was some pushback from some select board members, some of us may remember, and the question was, is that your position to take? Because you're sort of in charge of the McCall expansion project. The traffic is for us. Just, if times have changed, they've changed, but
Well, and to be clear here, the question is, do we support the select board's
Right,
article?
Yes.
that do we co-sponsor it?
Yeah.
No, this is co-sponsored with capital planning, in fact.
yeah.
I have a couple of comments, but before I get there, do other committee members, and you can certainly come back afterwards, I just want to give people the opportunity if they have comments first.
Not at the moment.
So I did want to just respond to Mr. Nixon first on, because I'm newer than you, and so having been here just over a term, so I don't know about the limits of distance of a tenth of a mile, a quarter of a mile, or whatnot. I think when Ms. Pryor goes through this presentation, you'll see that the substantial improvements extend about 6/10 of a mile away, which may be further than in some cases, but it's a whole neighborhood that they're looking at, and I think that isn't inappropriate. To look at the nature of a neighborhood and things. So to the extent there's a limit, I think the work extends beyond that limit. And I do think that how kids get to school, I mean, we do spend a lot of time on buses and other things for getting kids to school safety. So I feel like that's within our scope. Some of my thoughts, Ms. Pryor, just to take back as you're thinking about this, I know some of I followed this fairly closely, and some of the details were encouraging. I appreciate your leadership in moving several of the Pond Street constituent concerns forward. I know some of those details aren't fully designed yet, and so to the extent that that could be done in some collaboration and feedback from the community. I know we have traffic engineers and other folks in the community who have some thoughts that are only slightly different from what you presented in terms of placement of signs and I mean there's a few additional things that we'd like to see. One of the things that so obviously I like the feedback signs and the widened and improved signage and markings and whatnot on the roads. Because there were a number of things that the community was hoping for, and the crux of all this is that on the Pond Street side, the work being done is on Brantwood, Woodside, Norfolk, and Chesterford intersections to make it so that to narrow up the intersections so that cars can't whip through the intersections quite so quickly, and so that kids are in the crosswalk for a shorter amount of time. And so that's really important work because it helps protect the kids, it slows down the cars making those turns. What the community was concerned about was just that the through traffic. There wasn't so much calming for that. And so the speed signs are addressing that. But there were a few other things, which I'm not going to get into here because it's not really appropriate. But I think there had been a discussion about doing an updated data count afterwards to see what the efficacy of since the improvements were less than the community wanted, and since this was expected to be $3 million project, which I know you guys voted at $2.5 million, which Tool now has, as they've gotten closer and less contingencies, are down to $2.3 million. It sounds like it's not a financial thing, and the things I know the community are asking for are in the tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands range. That that data count be done so that if the improvements that Tool is saying will slow calm the traffic, don't in fact calm the traffic at the level that they are believed to, that we have another opportunity. So both in the things that Tool has recommended, since some of it's not been exactly determined, if we could have some input, and then secondly in the other part, that would be helpful. Anyway, I'm straying off a little bit here, but those were just the things that when I think about it. Since I know I have two constituencies as a Lynch neighborhood person, there's the Pond Street constituency, which was very vocal about this, and there's a constituency on the other side. And so I'm trying to thread this and be supportive, but just to say, since I know some of the details aren't there, it would be great if the community could be involved in that, and if we could have that follow-up study.
Yep, so
Or
I think.
Not study, by the way, specifically data count.
Right.
There's
So as it relates to the design documents have been submitted to Town Hall. This will be taken up at town meeting, probably I'm guessing, on the third night, just given where it falls in the numbering at town meeting. And it is a financial article, so it has to be at least the first Monday in May. So I don't know that we usually don't design changes. We try sometimes on the floor of town meeting to make design changes, but I think to the extent that there's feedback on that design, from members of the community, if they wish to speak to that at town meeting, if they wish to submit written comments in advance. Certainly, any member of the public who's not a town meeting member could ask the moderator for time to speak. So that's always an option. But we, Select Board, beyond asking for those additional flashing signs outside the school zone, did not tweak the design. And I'm not sure that we intend to tweak the design, but community members can always provide feedback. And then as it relates to a traffic count study, we did ask Tool, and they did commit to doing a traffic count study after school is back in session, after these changes have been made. We have not set a time certain. School starts in September. I'm sure we want to work out the kinks of buses and timing in the first month. So I don't know if it'll be the first fall of the school, of the opening of Lynch. We have no commitment to that exact time frame, but we will have it done to compare. We have a baseline, and we want to see if it did, what it impacted and how it impacted. So we will follow up on that.
Great.
I appreciate that, Ms. Pryor, because I think it's possible the traffic patterns may change around Lynch a bit once the school, we just don't know.
We don't know.
I don't know that they will, I don't know that they won't, so I think that that was a smart.
So I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
the project will span more than one fiscal year.
Right.
And to the extent that we will issue bans for borrowing, we do rescind borrowing like we're doing with the Lynch Solar. So I think the
Right.
timing of that study or additional improvements will be probably a next budget year question. What did the actual bids come in at? What did these actual improvements cost?
Right.
Is the $3 million sufficient? Is there money left over? We won't know that yet.
But you're not pulling back on it right now?
We are not pulling back on that right now, no.
Okay.
The motion in the book is the motion in the book.
Got it.
The current design and cost is slightly less than the motion in the book.
Yep.
But we tend to rather ask for more and rescind what we don't need.
Right.
So that's, yes, we made no motion to reduce, made no action to reduce the motion. It remains $3 million.
Okay.
And that's what's going to town meeting.
So there may be space if additional work needed to be done,
Right.
or changes. Got it.
May.
Thank you. May.
I'm not that close to it. I'm not a traffic engineer.
You're not a traffic engineer?
No.
May I just say for the record, I pulled up the policy, the board voted, Ms. Bergstrom and I are both correct. Vicinity is described as being within 1/10 to 1/4 of a mile.
See?
So nice job.
And as Mr. Hofkrop stated, actually on the Pond Street side, Chesterford was a half mile, slightly more. So we did go a bit wider. In fact, the top of Canal Street at Main Street is almost closer to a half mile as well. This particular circle for Lynch went beyond that quarter mile.
To Middlesex and so
got out
forth,
to-
yeah.
Got out to just more intersections.
Yeah.
So we drew a slightly wider circle on the study this time.
So this is who voted this policy? Is
Select
voted
Board,
this in
2018.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was in reaction to not including that as part of the VO project and then having to go back and sort of retrofit. a
And
little bit.
specifically not even being allowed to, so very.
Not even being
Let me
allowed,
just, the
right.
last paragraph, which is important, says, "The town shall provide funding for the traffic safety study within the school expansion project budget unless funding for the traffic safety study is provided by a funding partner such as the Massachusetts School Building Authority." They have limitations on what they will partner on. So
Right.
that's why we approached this very differently on the McCall expansion, because that was self-funded.
Right.
I mean, I'll just echo what Michelle said. I support, as a now member of the somewhat former Traffic and Transportation Advisory Committee, I think any money that we can spend in support of safer routes to school for kids is really important. And, on a selfish level, Mr. Nixon and I have talked about being residents of the Morocco catchment area. And, I think we have a lot of, when that project actually does come up, we have a lot of traffic things to address in our neighborhood as well. And I hope that we can do that. So I think it's always a wise investment to spend money on making our streets safer for the children walking to school. Because, with the commitment we've made to neighborhood schools, kids actually walk to school, right? And so, you see it very clearly when you drive around town at certain hours. And we need to make sure that, given the amount of cut-through traffic that comes through this town, it's a safer place for kids to walk, especially the littler ones.
And kids are net zero.
Okay, last thing I'm going to say on this, this is a question that may come up on the floor of town meeting, since the chair is here. We funded a year ago, and maybe a year and a half ago, a curb extension and rapid flashing beacon at the crosswalk at Leonard Field, speaking of the Morocco area. Capital Planning said at the time it was the most important school safety project we were funding. And it's not built yet. So that might be something you could ask the town manager about, because
That came up on Monday. Bids
it?
were in. Yep.
Good.
I think it might start next week. Watch the tape. That question specifically came up on Leonard.
This is like
and
your
Leonard
literacy
Field and the Beacon.
presentation.
It really is, just automatic delivery.
It's great. Thank you.
Just-in-time responses. No, truly, Chris, I forget the timing, but it's very much imminent.
Good.
Maybe a couple weeks out, but I believe we've selected a vendor. Oh, boy. People watching at home, please don't fact-check me, but it's on our meeting for Monday.
When this article comes up on the floor of town meeting, if there's not a collective consciousness about that, don't be surprised if a precinct 1 or 2 town meeting member asks about that, but you've got a great response.
I'll
Right.
even have an accurate one
Yeah.
by then.
Yeah.
So
So
I would like
for-
to make a motion.
Oh, I was about to say. No, go ahead.
Can I just say one other thing, just, because you had mentioned people can come up and speak on town meeting floor, whether they're town meeting members or they get permission from the moderator. But I think to the extent that there is that desire, which I think there is, of select board to work with the community on some of the last details that haven't been designed yet, and on the data counts to inform future work in the area, that might reduce how much litigation happens on the floor. The more if that's expressed. Anyway, did you have a motion?
I would like to make a motion for the school committee to recommend favorable action on Article 26.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pryor.
So we will now move on to the Article 34, refurbishing the high
If
school
you feel the need to
gym.
move on to Article 34 with me versus the expert in the room, Mr. Nixon.
Ms. Pry,
I know it is our article, the Select
Yeah.
Board, co-sponsored with EFPBC.
Do you want to start it? Do you want to start the presentation? And
Sure. So this is actually, I will be talking about this in my Article 1 presentation and as part of Article 34, because the journey to the high school gym, there are others who've been on this a lot longer. I'm not going to go back to the original floor and how long it was supposed to last, whatever. What I will say is that the Select Board has contributed $130,000 toward engineering studies to accelerate the gym floor redesign, and the Select Board has committed another $1.3 million in ARPA to see this gym floor replaced. The motion on the floor for town meeting is to use a portion of free cash and $900,000 something of overlay surplus funds, which are an account that we have for tax abatements, that if residents don't apply for an abatement, there's money in tax overlay that then rolls over year to year. We've accumulated a balance that we wanted to actually invest in a capital project. And the gym floor was the one that kind of came to the front. We had another project in mind. So the Select Board has invested $1.4 million in ARPA money, and an additional $900,000 being directed to this project to replace the gym floor, to reconfigure the gymnasium, to replace some of the equipment and, materials and the bleachers in the gym. So we are asking town meeting to support both the transfer of overlay money to this project and the use of free cash for a modest, like $200-something thousand delta. We see the need. We heard a lot from the community on the gym floor: volleyball parents, basketball parents, wrestling parents, lots of parents. And we had a tour. I was on a tour with Mr. Hopcroft and Mike Betancourt and I to actually get a tour from the athletic director to show us how, what it will look like, that the bleachers don't roll out, that the orientation of the current floor really limits our ability to host certain events. So the need is great, and we're in fact thinking of suggesting to the moderator that the precinct meetings, they all take a tour of the gym floor on the first night of town meeting. We can have a good look-see of what it looks like. So that's the background. But on the first night, I think we're looking at ARPA sort of, broadly, and capital investments broadly as a select board. This is one of the sort of big-ticket items and highlighted items where it's had the most significant investment of select board-directed money toward a capital improvement.
And having also been on a gym floor back when I was chair of committee before Mr. Hopcroft, I can't tell you how much I appreciate Select Board finding the funding for this, because the floor has really become a safety issue for the kids. And we do have a robust athletics program here in Winchester, and keeping kids safe in the gymnasium, it's not just all about aesthetics, it really is about form and function in there. And it's unfortunate we weren't able to do it with the new high school, and I know a lot of people in the community presumed that it was done with the new high school, so I really appreciate you taking the time with community members at Select Board and the time this committee's taken to talk to the community about it and understand why that didn't happen back when we got a brand-new high school. So it feels like tying the ribbon finally on the new high school here, so just
Well, that and the theater lights and the flag.
Yeah, in the theater, correct. I wasn't going to go there, Ms. Pryor.
I'd love
I'm saying it on Monday.
To expand on the point Ms. Bergstrom just made. So I think there's some groups of people in town who are frustrated because they presume it was replaced with the
Right.
new high school, and they don't understand why we're having to replace it, so it wasn't. There's also a group of people who are questioning why we didn't replace it with the high school, because then we wouldn't need to be replacing it. So just for the record, when we were invited into the MSBA process, the floor was about 4.5 years old. It's not a wood floor. It may have looked that way when it was new. It's printed. It's a resilient rubberized floor. Just like a rubber roof, it wears out. They actually don't last as long as a athletic maple floor. It is a cheaper option than maple. And I wasn't a part of that conversation way back when to make that decision. I'm told from those who have been here a long time, I'm told that when the gym first opened up, it was a rubberized floor. Today, the floor sits on top of what's left of a previous rubberized floor. So I guess Winchester liked rubberized floors for athletics. However, our peer districts in the Middlesex League play on maple. So our athletes are, if you think about it, they're practicing on a surface that's then unfamiliar when they actually are the visiting team. There is some premium to go with maple, but it's on the order of, I believe it was $160,000 or $180,000. And I thank Ms. Pryor, who suggested when we make the presentation, we need to talk about longevity.
Yeah.
Because the rubber floor typically lasts 15 years. Again, this one is pushing 19. When properly maintained, these floors can go well beyond 40 years. So Stoneham's is 30 years old. Lexington's is over 20 years old. I believe the Lynch that we just tore down had the original floor in it from 1960. So it relies on a proper maintenance program and sort of resurfacing, but we're not sanding the floor down every 5 years. The other point I just wanted to make is one about timing. Because the Select Board has already allocated ARPA to the design piece, so we are literally about to get going on that, just to expedite things. We do need town meeting's approval to fund the actual construction, and should that happen, we would not have a bid set until this summer, sometime maybe in July, contractor on board in August. So this is nothing that would be complete by the start of school, but it would start during the summer and would be complete prior to the winter season. We are also aware we have a couple of little elections that are coming. We have a state primary on September 3rd, I believe it is. We also have a presidential election. Secretary Galvin is expecting a large turnout for both. As you know, we typically use the gym for the election, so we are having some conversations with town clerk, and superintendent has expressed his flexibility. We will do whatever we can to kind of accommodate an election here at the high school. That's the goal, and not have to go back to decentralized elections. We did hold the Waterfield special ballot question election. That was down in the Commons. Much lower turnout for that, so we may require some supplemental space. But for anybody who's concerned, how do we go vote if we're tearing up the gym? It's on the radar, and we're talking about it.
And Mr. Ria and Mr. Mahoney have assured us they'll be able to reaccommodate fall sports as well. That they did it before, they can do
Yes.
it again.
Excellent point, yes.
Other questions, comments, concerns? Yeah, Ms. Bolanese.
Oh, I was just going to make a motion.
Sounds good.
That works too.
I was just going to make a motion for school committee to vote
favorable action of Article 34 regarding the Winchester High School gymnasium.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, folks.
You are free to go. Thank you, I appreciate you coming out.
Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle.
It's a long few weeks till town meeting this spring. Well,
A couple more days, right?
Trudge, trudge.
We'll now move on to,
Feels like a week.
Thank you, Michelle.
we'll now move on to Article 19 regarding the facilities master plan, which the committee has identified a need, and Mr. Nixon has worked closely with the FPBC to put that forward. Mr. Nixon.
So, do you want to pull, there we go, Andrea has it up. So, just to remind the committee, our practice, longstanding practice in the district has been to prepare or update a school district facilities master plan about every 10 years. This has proven to be, it's a very helpful process. That document has been very helpful for both the school, really for the school committee and the select board, because we can't get anything done without funding. These master plans have been really helpful for us to kind of articulate to our community a facilities need. In some instances, it has been especially helpful, for instance, in kind of convincing the MSBA that the Vincent Owen was a priority in 2010, and subsequently the high school was a priority. If you don't already feel old, we broke ground on Winchester High School 10 years ago, which is hard for me to believe, but that happened. The master plan was very helpful for the high school as well. It was very helpful for the Lynch submission. We have heard consistently from senior staff at the MSBA, literally like how impressed they are. Winchester kind of has a reputation. We are thoughtful and planful when it comes to our long-term facilities view. It affords us an opportunity when we submit a statement of interest to the MSBA. We typically follow along and say, oh, by the way, here's our final draft of the master plan, as we did with Lynch, and then later, here's the final version. They read it. We get feedback on it. And as I said, it's useful even if we're not partnering with the MSBA. We last funded our current existing master plan in 2 tranches in 2014 and 2015, so the time is ripe. And as we have all discussed, we're in a unique time, right? We're on the backside of a global pandemic. Our enrollment today isn't what we expected we would have seen, but that's true for just about every district in Massachusetts and many parts of the country. So Dr. Hackett, as I think we all know, has been working with the UMass Donahue Institute on some focused evaluation on kind of near-term enrollment trends. And this is a point I hope he and I can clarify for everybody tonight, given the FinCom report that we all got. So a master plan includes a comprehensive 5 and 10-year enrollment and demographic study. So what do I mean by that? We look at current enrollment, past enrollment, residency. We look at birth rates, look at in-migration, out-migration, demolition permits, new building permits. We look at major housing developments, both in construction and those that are planned. And we also actually look at zoning initiatives that are either pending or that have been approved. So the last master plan absolutely looked at some additional density in the North Main Street area, right? There's some things we talked about in the current master plan that haven't yet come to fruition, but interestingly now they are. And that includes the subdivision along North Forest Street, backing up to the Vale, that huge development in Woburn. So there are some things that do come to fruition. There are some things that don't. And then there are things that kind of happen we never anticipated. Perfect example is River Street. Nobody was talking about River Street when we did our current master plan. What we were actually really consumed about was a 340-unit high-density project on Montvale, if you remember that. And then that didn't happen. So the further out you go, the fuzzier things become. But all of these elements kind of contribute to the population of Winchester and the likelihood that we'll have X or Y number of kids. This is super important in a master plan because the next big project, as we all know, is Morocco. We've been talking about it for years. We saw great support for the Morocco Life Extension Plan about 3 years ago. That was a modest investment, about $3.5 million, only to extend the life of that building until it could be replaced sometime between 2028 and 2030, not 2037. So to make that happen, we need to know how many kids are going to be there. No one at this table right now can say with any real confidence if a new Morocco should accommodate 440 kids. or 580 kids. We have talked at some length about what does preschool look like in Winchester years from now? You know, we are physically expanding the preschool at Lynch, which I think is great. Is that a conversation we want to have? That's a programming discussion. And we have programming discussions that can inform the master planning process as well. Should a new Morocco include some additional preschool rooms? That's something we would talk about. And I want to thank Ms. Bergstrom, who did a great job covering for me last night when my car was in the tunnel. But we look at all school facilities, right? And we consider many different uses, including administrative uses. The Parkhurst, there's Parkhurst. The Mystic School is a, school facility. And very much is one we're talking a lot about right now, right? With respect to the heating system and what kind of investment do we want to make. Should the Mystic School even be standing in 10 years, or should it be something else? These are big questions that the master plan is just so important for. So last time, we funded the master plan in 2 tranches, and ultimately it was about $85,000. We're asking for $145,000 here, with the expectation that approximately 40 can go towards that expanded enrollment demographic study, leaving 100 or a little more on the table for the master planning team to do their work. If this gets funded, we would start very quickly with that extension of the enrollment demographic study, and then the summer would include, again, that sort of evaluation of existing facilities. I want to say quickly, a master plan is not about design. So how would it look at Morocco? Well, number one, how big should it be and to accommodate what? Then it might say, these are some options for a new Morocco where it sits today. Are there any other options? As you've heard me say before, the MSBA will require us to look at other options. It's a neighborhood school. The only other option is right next door on Leonard Field. The master plan will not pick winners and losers. It's not going to say you should do it here or should do it there. It won't say it should be a 2-story building, it should be a 3-story building. It'll simply give us some options to understand, and then it's from that point that we really get serious about whether we partner with the MSBA or we go it alone. So it's just a really helpful exercise. I'm going to, if I may, put Dr. Hackett on the spot for a moment, though, just sort of to clarify the work that has been done to date with UMass. I think there may be some community understanding that it's a broader scope of work that was wrapped up in January than really what it is. I think it's great that they were providing some assistance, but given that they use some cohort survival ratios looking out to 2030, I don't want folks to kind of misunderstand or think that we've done that sort of deep dive that we need to do, both for 2030 and 2035. So, do you
Oh, well
mind taking a
said. I
moment?
mean, I think, obviously not everyone pays attention to the meetings all the time, but when we did this, we were very clear, and this was back in the fall, that what we really, and we had said this actually at 2 consecutive Springtown meetings, and understanding in 21, 22, when we went into 22, 23 budget, we talked about the fact that we just didn't really know what to anticipate with our enrollment. And that obviously has a huge impact on our budget, really kind of more specifically to elementary class size sections. And that, in fact, said that we knew in 22, 23, in that budget, we may have been overstaffed, but we could not run the risk of not having enough staff in place, particularly at the elementary level, and trying to add sections in September is not good practice. I would just remind the committee, well, not remind the committee, but the committee knows that we have gone from 110 elementary sections to this current budget, we're carrying 100 elementary sections. So we've dropped 10 sections in a couple of years, which I think shows our commitment to making sure that, one, we're being fiscally responsible, but also just to say that, we also have still and will continue to be committed to reasonable class sizes at the elementary level. So even with those reductions, we are still, our class sizes are reasonable. Of course, we currently are trying to estimate what it looks like going into next year. We have budgeted for 100 sections. We're hopeful that's where we stay. We believe we're comfortable with that right now. We have another year of Lynch at Parkhurst, which is that dynamic makes it a little trickier, particularly around kindergarten. But I will share with the committee that because of the reduction in a couple of sections next year for Lynch at Parkhurst, we will actually be holding 3 sections of kindergarten at Parkhurst, Lynch sections at Parkhurst, whereas we only held 1 this year. 3 will be our max. Any students that have not registered who are new to town, then we'll have to make some decisions about where we might go, obviously providing transportation to those students with a promise to return to Lynch once we're in the new building. But this whole enrollment study was very specifically for the purpose, as stated in previous town meetings, to be able to provide us information about our budget planning, not for long-term facilities planning. So to Mr. Nixon's point, and we'd even talked about it when we came to you, that really was kind of a phase 1 approach for us, understanding that we really would need to have a much more in-depth look, an updated look with potential residential facilities being built, what was really coming up and what was on the books. It also gives us a little bit of chance to see what the result of River Street and potentially Cambridge Street. We're going to be living that experience and already are living that experience a little bit right now. So we're hopeful that the master facilities plan will pass. We think it's an important step. And we see, we just can't, you cannot do it, you cannot do it without that next phase of the enrollment study.
And my last just closing thought, because this school committee voted, well, the previous school committee voted, that our intention to submit a statement of interest to the MSBA on Morocco at the next core replacement cycle, which opens in January. The timing of this is important. For us to be in a position to submit that SOI credibly, we need to have a master plan. So that's why it's important we fund it here in the spring so we can get things going in the summer. We would most certainly have a draft master plan in time to submit the SOI. That's actually what we did in our, remember we took 3 swings at the plate on Lynch. We actually submitted for both Lynch and Morocco. Our initial SOI submission to the MSBA came with a final draft master plan. They understood it wasn't yet finished, but there was a lot of good information there. It actually worked perfectly because it was when we finished and we voted it, as Ms. Bergstrom remembers, we gave us an opportunity to kind of knock on their door a few months later and say, oh, by the way, now it's finished, and sort of extend that conversation. So the timing is key here.
Questions from the committee?
I was just going to make a motion.
Oh, well, before
Go
you do
for
that, let me just say a little comment I agree with everything that you've said, and I think it's important to note, one, how short-term the current UMass, and I get that it's confusing to people because they're both, maybe they use the same outside firm, and so they sound like the same thing because it's the same company doing the work, but this is a near-term thing, and that we have some very significant, Morocco, we talk about a lot, Mystic, Parkhurst, I mean, you mentioned them, but, if we're going to have, data-informed decisions, it's impossible without the data. So I think it's really important. Anyway, Ms. Bolanese, please go ahead with your motion.
I make a motion for the school committee to vote favorable action on Article 19 in support of the 10-year Winchester Public Schools Master Facilities Master Plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
In triplet.
Aaron will figure it out later.
Can we just apologize collectively to Aaron for these minutes? Trying to follow the articles, and this is going to be a challenge.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.
I'm going to pause you, Mr. Hopcroft. I'm going to suggest that we move the subcommittee update to the end of the meeting, given
Very good.
that we need a budget discussion and a discussion on preschool tuition, which we probably need more focus on, and it's 8:15.
Sounds great. So let's go to consideration of FY25 budget.
Okay. So as previously provided in your packet, your finance subcommittee met on April 18th to consider some new information that we had provided, and just to kind of go through this process. As you know, without dragging this discussion out, as you know, you vote on your budget by charter. You have to provide it to town manager, early in February, late January. You voted this budget in January 30th, 2024. And you're voting a budget that takes effect several months later, and in a time when so much changes, from spring move-ins to special education referrals, to special education placements, to enrollment in registering kindergarten students, and then you go through the summer, and the summer always brings some additional changes in enrollment. So it's not an easy time frame, and as we did last year, we don't want to be in a position where when we do have changes that we don't recognize those when we can. And we are coming to you and went to the Finance Subcommittee to share with them that there have been a couple of changes that have happened within the last 3 or 4 weeks, specifically with out-of-district placements. So our commitment to students in special education, out-of-district placements specifically, is through until the end, until they are turn 22, correct? Yes. Checking my math. And we're always we have situations where we have students who may graduate and not need to continue services, and we have students who need to continue services, and that we don't always know what that's going to look like. We certainly in January of the year. So we are in a position to be able to share with you and recommend to you that we can make an adjustment to the out-of-district special education tuition line. And if Andrew, if you just go to the last slide, just to get that to the reduction number, we can make a reduction of $547,658. That really specifically represents a population of students, and I don't want to get into the numbers of kids, but it's not a lot of kids, obviously, but it is a certainty. This was budgeted specifically for their out-of-district tuition.
For specific students.
For specific students who will not be with us next year.
And who were with us.
And who were with us, and who we did not know whether they were going to be with us next year. And they were budgeted for that reason. So it would be, I think, irresponsible for us not to come to you and tell you this. It's $500,000, obviously a little more. And if you were to approve that reduction, it has no impact on anything else that you approved on January 30th within the budget, including the additional program enhancements that you added at the actual January 30th meeting, coming out of the public hearing meeting prior to. That reduction would bring our budget, your budget, to 4.67%. So we would recommend that, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
So without also getting into too many specifics, Dr. Hackett, that amount for out-of-district tuition, can you give an idea of what the range of out-of-district tuition placements are? Because I'm not sure that people recognize the upper range and the lower range of those, and how we could be, how we could be taking a reduction by that much.
Hypothetical students, not these students.
No, I mean, sure, I mean, just the range of students and range of programs that are available to families and to students based on their need. Obviously, we have students who are in out-of-district placements are come in a couple categories. One, when the district, cannot provide the services that the student needs to be successful. And to meet those needs. That can range from very complex profiles that include significant disabilities, not just in terms of their learning, but also physically, the assistance that we cannot provide in district. Those kinds of that profile can range anywhere from $250,000 to $450,000 for a placement. It generally would be residential, and just to also remember that those placements happen, and there's also services that continue over the course of the summer. So it's really almost a 12-month placement. And we don't have a lot of those, but in general, the range for kind of collaborative placements through other placements for other profiles of students, which would be day programs, range from 40 to 150 or so, $100,000 plus. And we're kind of all over that map. And, you know, as slide 3 shows, you know, what we are seeing is some trending down in the net from where we were in the actuals in FY23. So the 22-23 school year, we had 67 students. We went to this year 63 students, and that projection is showing you where we think we're going to land this year. We still feel very comfortable that we're on target for that, and then we had initially projected, as of January 30th, for the budget that you approved, 61 students with a need for the general fund budget of $3,247,320. So just a quick reminder, or a quick brief. We have several pots of money that fund out-of-district placements for special education and also other services. The general fund, which is right now in the budget that you have, is $3.2 million. We're recommending to decrease that to $2.699662. There's also IDEA 240, which is a yearly federal allocation. We don't generally see much fluctuation in that. So right now we're carrying, and we don't know what next year's number is going to be yet. So we're carrying the same amount of money, the $847 that we have in the current budget. And we also receive state circuit breaker money. This year, we are receiving, we are working off of 1.8. We have already received the $2 million. The district smartly, many years ago, established the practice of spending the money after it comes in, as opposed to spending it while you're in the year, which some school systems do. But it's really nice to have that certainty of what we know we're going to receive for circuit breaker money, so that $2 million represents that. We have used, over the last couple of years, some ESSER funding to get us kind of through what was the COVID hump, I think, in some extraordinary circumstances. That funding will be depleted by the end of September of this year. That would be ESSER 3. IDEA money, that was a one-time allocation that we're using this year. And then for the total budget allocations that you can see, and you can certainly do the math and see where we are. So those are the funding sources for out-of-district placements, and we're recommending to be able to reduce the general fund allocation by the amount as previously stated.
Are there questions or motions?
So I guess the question I would ask more for the record than anything is, you know, to the extent you've spoken about some really high per year costs, right? Are these optional costs?
They are not optional costs.
So
very good clarifying question. Yes.
So could you just sort of talk a little bit about why we're obligated to provide these services? And, you know, because I mean, I think there's been some conversation about sort of smaller numbers, and what you're actually flagging on a per student basis is actually quite large numbers, right? And I think there may be some misunderstanding about our obligation to provide services and whether we have the flexibility to choose something that's less expensive, or, you know, to not fund that, right? And that is not something that we have choice around.
We don't, nor should we, right? You know, we have an obligation and a duty and a responsibility to make sure that we're providing our students with the services that they need. If we can't do that in district, and that's what we want to be able to do to keep our kids in our town, in our neighborhoods, and that's why we do have in-district programming for several different profiles of students. But there are times when we just can't provide the services. There are times when parents make decisions to unilaterally place their students in a different school setting. That basically means that the students are placed by the parents before there's agreement with the school department through the IEP, special education team process. When those situations happen, then the work we do with parents is to try to figure out how we come to some kind of agreement about that. Massachusetts, it is rare that states allow unilateral placements like that. Massachusetts just happens to be a state that does allow that. As you know, as described, we have profiles of students that are, you know, clearly, especially when we're talking about some of the higher end of the range of numbers, that our students who just are so complex that they absolutely need in those placements. And Jen, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about just the process in general.
Sure. I think one of the things that people don't know about maybe is that we have an obligation to ensure that students are with a like cohort. And so for some of those higher end that Frank was talking about, those, we are unlikely to have any kind of cohort to match with those students. So that's one of the big things that drives those more expensive placements, in addition to typically the things they're working on very complex. I think everybody's goal from the beginning of the process is the least restrictive environment, right? So that starts with, a student that's in district, us making sure that as often as possible, they can be included in as many things as possible while still getting the supports and services that they need. And sometimes that scales up to a place where the least restrictive environment isn't necessarily here anymore to be able to access their needs. Were you asking about the process with the IEP, Frank, when it gets to that?
Well, I think to answer the question of this is a process, and we get to a place we don't have, this is not optional for us to do.
Yeah. I think everybody takes very seriously, for the students' sake, first and foremost, the idea of not taking them out of their neighborhood school or their school where, they're going to have activities with the kids. It's the neighborhood they're going to be in, or the other students they're going to be with, like through middle and high school. So it's always our goal, if possible, and then to build programming if we need to, right? If we have a cohort that we can build programming around, to do that ourselves and to adjust our programs so as not to have to go out of district. I would say there's also just an interesting dynamic that happens around, we're a team, right? So when we meet as a team, there's all these different people on the team that may have different perspectives about what's, how much progress is enough progress, how much, are they getting the supports that they need? And it's complex with disabilities, right? So anyone who's experienced it firsthand, it's not, we're not in a lab. It's not like, oh, you changed this one thing, and then we can say, oh, that's what works, right? There's many things happening at all times. So there's, often some disagreement about where that placement and best fit is, and then sometimes that leads to the unilateral placements. Sometimes, very often, it leads to, rejected IEPs, which kicks off another process with the DESE and with their supports through that. So I think that's a little bit of where sometimes the gray area comes up, because there are different perceptions about kind of what's the best fit and what's working best for that. But it's always our intention to, if we possibly can, support and keep them with us. And then it's also sometimes in their best interest that we recommend, never mind that the parents or an advocate may feel differently, that we know as much as we want to, we don't have the programming to service. So we want them to be where they need to access, so they can get to the curriculum.
Can I make an observation as the old guy on this committee? There's a really good reason why our average costs per out-of-district placement have been going higher. And it's because once upon a time, we did not have 4 specialized learning centers in our district. So once upon a time, we had like 20 to 25% more out-of-district placements, like normalized to district enrollment. We were sending more and more kids out of district because we didn't have the resources here that we really wanted to provide for them. The students and their families wanted desperately to be here, least restrictive environment, but we didn't have the resources, and it was going to take a significant investment. So, in fact, I'm sorry she's not here to hear me say this, under the leadership of Michelle Pryor, who was on FinCom at the time and a leader of FinCom on this issue, we advocated for some significant increases in our budget so that we could staff up and bring the resources to expand that programming. And Ms. Pryor was a real leader for this. It was, if you build it, they will come idea. And we did, and they did. And we saw our out-of-district enrollment numbers start to go down, the actual number of students. But there's a consequence of that, right? There is a limit, lowercase, right? There are certain things we can do in the district. And then there are some students for whom the needs are just so either severe or complicated, particularly with medical needs and so forth. As much as we'd like to, we can't. Those sort of more, I'll say, complicated situations tend to drive higher costs. So our average cost per out-of-district placement is going up because we were able to get some of those more manageable service plans back into the district. Is that not right?
That's accurate.
So sometimes, I mean, that average cost is going up, but if you look at the number, it's gone down. And thankfully, we still have a few veteran town meeting members who used to be on FinCom who back us up on that. But it's just a public service announcement that's worth making because it's harder for us to remember that kind of stuff. But it's really one of the great successes in partnership with the Finance Committee.
And the 14% increase in out-of-district tuition costs
What's that?
didn't exactly help us either.
Exactly. Much like the unfunded mandates that don't help us.
Right.
I think the other
Exactly.
component, and it's not here, but just to remind everyone that we do also have a special education transportation line because many of these students, we do transport, if not, well, the majority of students, we do transport. We are part of the SEAM Collaborative, which I serve in, for you as your representative on their executive board. Not unlike what we face with our transportation contract, we do purchase our services for transportation through them. So the collaborative acts as a collaborative, and they contract with a service provider for transportation that all the member districts participate in. We supposedly get a better rate that way, but the collaborative is still in negotiations or will be coming to the board for consideration of a contract that I can just share with you will have a fairly significant increase as well. And that's something that we just really need to keep an eye on and manage. And so we're comfortable that we will be able to cover that. We're not asking for more money for that, but just to give you some additional, something to look forward to, that will also be a factor for us too.
Great. Are there questions?
So both mandated and the right thing to do.
Yeah, well,
Absolutely.
so just to be very clear,
I appreciate the question for the clarification for public.
it was a
too.
public service
I
announcement
understand.
question. Because I think that
Yeah.
sometimes this gets lost, the complexity and the cost. And I imagine sort of looking forward to town meeting, we might get a question about how, quote unquote, so much money
Right.
Right.
appeared as savings, right? And I think, being able to actually have on the public record as a public service announcement, the history behind that is a helpful thing, right? Because it will potentially, by those who are less familiar with these topics, will and could potentially become a point of discussion.
Absolutely. And I think maybe what we do is we take the WinCam recording of this particular discussion and go to video. We're going to go to video for this question. So,
News at 11.
Good. If we go get Girl Scout cookies while that's playing.
Yeah.
I fully support that message.
So, thank
Karen,
you.
you were going to make a motion.
Thank you.
Did you?
Thank you.
thank you.
I was going to make a motion?
Thought you were.
Yeah, you're about to.
I think I was on the previous one, but yes, I would make a motion to, for the school committee to consider or to amend its budget by the amount of, oh boy,
up
here, where to
there.
go?
You
Well,
could
I'm not
just
going
say-
to be able to see it. Wait, okay. $547,658 for a total school department budget of $66,144,294.60, or a year-over-year increase of 4.67%.
Is there a second? Oh, is there a question?
Before we second that, Stacy doesn't like pennies, does she? She likes round dollars?
I like pennies.
Oh, well.
Oh, there you go.
I'm sorry, in deference to this guy, I'll second the motion.
I mean, Andrew is our finance director.
Great line.
You give him a van and you give him pennies and he's happy.
Getting him
So,
a coffee mug that says, I like pennies. That's appropriate from this guy. Okay, I seconded the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Now, related to that, may I ask, in terms of communication, to FinCom, the Select Board. Can we ask you to sort of relay this in some written form to them so they're aware of what we just did tonight?
Be happy to. And I also,
Or the chair can.
or the chair can, either one. Happy.
We'll do that.
Spread the good. You can have it.
Spare time.
We'll see how the presentation's going.
Collaborative presentation, right. But also just mechanically, you know this process better than I do. I did talk to Mark Toogood at Town Hall, and he did write up some motion language for the school committee that we could just plug in and include the dollar figure we were talking about, both the reduction and the total amount, the new amount. I'm happy to plug those numbers in. That language was reviewed by town council and submit that to him, but candidly, I don't know what happens from there, whether how that moves forward. Is that something that's provided to town meeting, some in a separate document, or because otherwise then it would have to be a motion from the floor, correct? If there isn't already a motion for consideration.
So the budget we
Anyone?
vote, right, comes from the Finance Committee. We can always amend the budget we voted at any time. I think we should communicate this back to FinCom. In years past, no one sort of likes to hash it out right there on the floor. If there's an opportunity to come to consensus, that's great to do. We can use our finance subcommittee of, the school committee to kind of carry on those conversations with your support, I think, Dr. Hackett. In some town meetings, in our pre-meeting that happens an hour and a half beforehand, we've even had representatives moving back and forth between FinCom and vice versa. But we have a little time, obviously, because this is a financial article in motion. We have some time to communicate this back to them. Not being a part of that subcommittee, what I'm not clear on, other than I think there's an email I saw with a number that FinCom voted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm eager to understand when and how a conversation can be had about the delta that remains and why that's important, in case there are some misunderstandings with FinCom, and there may be.
So just to clarify the language that you received was from the assistant town manager was a motion on the floor to amend
The school budget.
the yellow sheet number for the school budget?
I don't know.
Okay, because that's,
No,
because,
I mean, it's motion language that represents the action that you're taking tonight.
Correct.
I don't understand the mechanics, and
so
I know you
just,
all do.
so very,
but-
very quickly, I mean, all five of us, I think, are town
Town
meeting
meeting
members,
members.
but it's, the Winchester, unlike some other communities, the actual budget that goes to the floor is the finance committee's budget, not the town manager's budget. So, what I believe I'm hearing you saying is that the assistant town manager has provided amendment language to provide the funding that we've voted tonight through an amendment on the floor of town meeting to the yellow sheet.
Correct.
And what Chris just said is this potential of having some kind of negotiation in advance. And I think we can certainly decide what approach we want to take to that, right? Because there are actually two different approaches we can take. One of them is we don't provide any communication at all, so if we so choose, and we go directly to a motion on the floor of town meeting made by the school committee or one of the, somebody, the school committee cannot make the motion, but a town meeting member can make the motion on the floor of town meeting. Or we can choose to have a set of communications and see if there's somebody else who can agree to that or collaborate on that in advance.
Agree with everything you just said. An important, personally, I think an important element of trying to reach some agreement beforehand is you always have to identify a funding source. So,
It identifies free cash.
because it's a balance, exactly. So it needs to be, the numbers have to add up. So if we come forward, because what FinCom will present is what they call their balanced budget. If we're seeking more money, we need to be clear where that money's coming from. It would presumably be free cash. And we need to be able to articulate why, not only why we need the money, but why it's appropriate that it be coming from free cash. So there's sort of two elements to the presentation. And in years past, we've been able to reach some common ground with the Finance Committee. In fact, one town meeting we had, which some of you may remember, while this building was under construction, we held town meeting across the street at McCall. An hour before we opened town meeting on the yellow sheet, there were 2 yellow sheets. There was a yellow sheet A and a yellow sheet B, which thoroughly confused everyone. But we didn't actually have a deal with FinCom yet. So there were 2 yellow sheets that were printed and a lot of hard conversation, and then a vote was taken, and FinCom said to town meeting, you can ignore sheet A, we're going with B. I mean, it can literally work that way. That's a little late in the process, but just to give you an example. What it really just needs is communication.
Right. I think we've had some success
Yep.
in the recent past with working with FinCom,
Yep.
at least attempting to.
I mean, last year, the
Yeah.
budget that we're in was done that way, right? But it was done prior to this.
Yep.
And, candidly, I think that, I think the invitation for communication was more open last year than what I think we've experienced this year. And
So
for
too.
whatever reason, it's not necessarily, it's not a criticism, but as you know, we met with FinCom on February 29th and presented the budget. And last time we went through this, we went back another time. We invited back another time for more discussion with the full FinCom. This year, we didn't receive that invitation. After the 29th, we received some emails for some additional information that they were looking for. And candidly, I'm disappointed with some of the comments that were made, and some of the rationale and the reasons that were stated publicly by FinCom and within the document that they've provided and sent out to town meeting members. And I look forward to the opportunity to address some of those if asked the question. But we weren't really asked that question, so we didn't have really an opportunity to even hear or address the reduction of almost $1 million that they were recommending. So I don't know if it's your budget.
Yep.
I serve at the pleasure of the committee, so whatever you'd like me to do, or through the chair, you obviously reach out, but that's your decision, not mine.
I mean, I'm assuming it was recorded, but there was also the public hearing, the FinCom public hearing was taking place
Right now.
immediately, sort of
Right.
adjacent to our meeting
Yes.
tonight.
Right.
And I can't provide any independent verification of this, but it's possible that I got at least one quote that was said aloud in that hearing. And I would corroborate what Dr. Hackett just said about some of the tone of the comments. And I just don't know the extent of the opportunity for open communication. So certainly support collaboration and conversation, but I think there's also some reality around the tone of the communication and the opportunities to communicate.
Well, the communication could simply be notification of the action you took tonight.
Right.
Yeah, that could go.
Literally,
And
that's all I
an
would suggest.
opening to
Yeah.
a conversation if they're interested in doing so.
And with respect to you, Tom, so I was literally just saying, be the messenger about what we've
Right.
done. I don't know what your appetite and bandwidth is to get into a back and forth with FinCom on that delta right now, but maybe, you share it with them, and maybe that sparks a conversation.
I would support Dr. Hackett doing that.
There you go.
Excellent.
And I just want to say one more quick thing. In terms of because we've talked about the percentages, and FinCom obviously in their report has also talked a lot about this percentage, right? And I think my discomfort with that is that, the percentage increase is unlike other areas of the town budget. Actually, I would say probably there are very few that aren't like us in many ways, but, we have, on a year-to-year basis, the concept of starting from a zero-based budget in public administration is a challenging concept, right? Because we know, it's funny that we're talking about this sort of directly adjacent to a conversation about our out-of-district costs, which through statute and frankly, equity obligations are required to provide, right? There's an extent to which the percentage of increase on a year-to-year basis is in large part, I would argue, out of our control, right? And so, or at least in substantial part out of our control. And so I think I prefer to talk about the actual number as opposed to the percentage. I mean, I understand why the percentage increase is important, but I feel like the percentage increase always ends up related to Prop 2.5.
Right.
And
last part again?
that always ends up being sort of compared to or related to Proposition 2.5.
Yes.
Right? And the realities of the labor market, the realities of our statutory obligations to provide services to children, and these are not things that we can change, right? And so if the labor market is going in a certain direction, if inflationary pressures are going in a certain direction, we are just along for that ride, right? And so I know that the motion, I think a point I would make is, the sort of conversation about the percentage is always a little bit uncomfortable to me. So.
I agree with that, by the way. I've always struggled with that as well.
Can I, you just made a very interesting point when you talk about the labor market, something that people, and certainly FinCom knows we do control, well, we don't fully control. It's a partnership. It's a negotiation, our CBA.
Yeah,
So this is maybe something important for all of us, including administration, to go back and sort of reflect on. So many in our public, our constituents don't really appreciate kind of where both sides come from when you come to the table. All they really can judge is what's the end agreement. And I'm very pleased actually how the process ended through this last series of negotiations, given kind of some of the proposals, right, that came to the table, particularly in an inflationary economy. So you're absolutely right in that regard. I don't know how closely everybody, I'm not a Facebook guy. I'm on what used to be Twitter. Every morning I'm seeing announcements in Massachusetts about districts that are laying off teachers. I believe it's the North Andover superintendent was just put on administrative leave yesterday over a $3 million budget gap. These are very tough times for districts. Winchester's not going to be a district where we're laying off teachers because we failed to do our job on the floor of town meeting to get the resources that we need, period. I believe that very strongly. But I do believe that there is an opportunity for us to sort of underscore, because we value our teachers and staff, and because we want to attract and retain what we call the best and the brightest, right? The people who are really passionate about doing this and to the benefit of our kids, we need to pay them a fair and attractive wage, have fair and attractive benefits. We are in competition with other peer districts who are after those same people. To my point earlier when we began tonight, the position we just filled is a very hard position to fill, and there are many others. So perhaps, not knowing how this is going to play out, perhaps part of the message to either the superintendent or the chair may simply need to acknowledge, although Prop 2.5 is real, and there are folks who like to look at percentages, there are percentage increases in collective bargaining agreements, but there's a reason why they're there. And we should, I think, if we're going to talk about that, we should talk about that increase in the context of our peer districts. And there are, is it 10, is it 11? We've agreed upon sort of a list of districts with the Finance Committee. We have long ago agreed, if we're going to talk about who we compare ourselves to, it's these. That may be a conversation worth having.
Post-town meeting.
What's that?
Post-town meeting.
Well, or it may have to come up as part of the conversation on the floor of town meeting, depending upon where it goes.
Right.
That's all.
I would just also add, just because we really have not talked about it much, but, the committee, first of all, I thought one other thing you're going to mention is just the number of strikes that are happening. At
It's on my mind.
very real expense of students, with Newton being the most recent one, and I think probably the one that everyone really then has now kind of started to say, wow, paying attention to that is horrific, and nobody wants to be there. I mean, you never as a community get over that. It's not just the strike in the moment. Sure. That strike will forever be part of the history of that school department. Yes. Mm-hmm. And they will be talking about that year over year over year over year.
And not only talking about it, but it affects culture too.
Absolutely. You don't recover those relationships easily, if ever. And, but I also just want to remind the committee and remind the public, not the committee, but you negotiate a contract that we're going in the third year in with a 4% increase that added 10 minutes
Yep.
to the instructional day,
Yes.
which is the equivalent of 5 days of school.
Yes.
So that is not insignificant, and candidly, I think that, the working relationship we have with the WEA has always been cooperative. We are entering another, next, in the fall, we'll be talking again about the successor agreement. And, candidly, it's the environment everywhere is challenging. People are feeling the stress in a way that I don't think they've felt before. I don't think there's been a full recovery with the emotions and the mental strain and emotional strain and toll that the pandemic took. And when I speak to colleagues, other superintendents in other school communities, I mean, it's, what we always hear is the morale is not good. And I think there's all kinds of reasons why that may be true, right? Some of which we don't control. And some of those we don't control are outside external pressures that we all feel, whether it's new state regulations, whether it's, community pressure, whatever it may be. That is true everywhere. So these are not easy times. And I would anticipate that, while we'll have a productive and successful negotiation session for the successor agreement, it's going to take some work. But I think we should be proud. I think you should be proud. And I think the WEA should be proud of the fact that we did extend the school day, which is particularly important at the elementary level because we have one of the shortest school days around. So.
And I'd also like to say this, and then I'll let this go, but this budget also reflects program improvements, which this committee has been reluctant to add for a number of years because we've consistently heard about the challenges of the town finances, but by not doing so, we haven't taken advantage of some opportunities to invest in our programming as well. And I think that it's a good communication to the community that, as they see things change in the world and they want different things in our school system, that means we have to invest in things in our school system. We can't continue to do what we did last year for the same amount of money and expect to be able to also improve things at the same time. That both of those things it's an investment, it's a value and an investment. And I am actually really glad that this committee, and I know, Tim, you weren't here to vote it, but you had an opportunity to tonight, so to support investment in performing arts and literacy and elementary mathematics and start to make some of those improvements that, our 2018 override for the town wasn't a huge program improvement override for this district. The intention was we were catching up on things we had already deferred for years. So the override sort of didn't get us ahead in the world. It brought us up to where everybody else was with a few small tweaks and changes. I mean, some that are absolutely valuable to the district, like the Mandarin program, but
Students.
yeah, but not a significant investment in a lot of program improvement. So, because we had so many things, like the Dean of Students was something we'd been asking for 10 years. That was a deferred ask. So, and I think anybody who's dealt with a Dean of Students at the high school would say that was an absolutely valuable investment. So, just throwing that out there too, that's something else that contributes to this budget.
Great. All right, so we'll move on to consideration of preschool tuition.
Okay. As you may recall, we discussed this at your last meeting. You asked for some additional information. We have provided that. It was in your packet. Andrew has called up the spreadsheet for those of you who have the eye strength to see it. I am both envious and impressed. Just to get to the end of this, to start with the end of this, we're recommending a 5% 3-year, year-over-year increase in the tuition, preschool tuition. And we've talked about what we've calling a gap, but it's an important reminder for all of us that the program is really there to serve the students who have needs that have been identified prior to them coming to us. So the students that pay tuition are students who we bring in as community partner students, there is a limit on there is a ratio for how many students we can have who are tuition-paying students with respect to the students who are there that we're programming for with needs. So I just want to make sure we all understand that, and we do, but everyone understands that this is not, we're not looking to be self-sufficient, but we need to make some decisions around moving forward. And I think, right now where we are, and you saw the year over year, the deficit has grown. I think it is time for an increase. I also would say to you that while we provided the private and other public school comparisons, I don't know that that's really helpful information. We run our program the way we run our program. Private, the private schools, a lot of them are running, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., providing different kinds of services. That we're not that. And also, I think that what we're really trying to do is to make sure that we run a robust, which we do. We have the preschool program is fantastic, and we meet the needs of all kinds of students and families. But if the program didn't require community students, you wouldn't be receiving tuition funding, is my point. You'd be running the program for the students that we would be required to run the program for. So we're not looking to try to make this self-sufficient. We're not necessarily even looking to what we're calling a gap, and we're calling a gap because we've not increased the budget to address it. So it's either going to be an increase in the operational budget, which obviously, when we end in the negative, we are covering that in our operating budget from other sources of funds that have not been expended for whatever reason. But, we can't continue to just budget at the level we're budgeting at year over year, because the gap is going to grow. So it's probably a dual effect of increasing our budget to cover the cost, and then providing, I think, a reasonable increase in the tuition paying side of it. And the way I've been thinking about it is there a ratio that you want to get to and maintain? So is it 70-30, 70% of the budget coming from the operating budget, 30% coming from tuition? I wonder whether that might be a better way to think about it, so that we can kind of pace our tuition increases on what we think is appropriate for the split between how we fund the program. And that, I just throw that out there because it's been going through my head, not as an answer and not necessarily for a discussion tonight, because I think there's an extended discussion. But we would recommend for a 3-year increase of 5%. We think that's the right thing to do for our own planning purpose. Like we talked about circuit breaker, we know what that number is. It gives us a solid number. It also allows families to plan, because remember, a lot of our families are in that program for more than 1 year, right? So it allows them to know up front what is our cost going to be. Mm-hmm. So that's our recommendation, and happy to try to answer questions.
I think your idea about, it needs to be an extended conversation. I wondered, because we have an integrated program, might you look at that ratio of the, quote, model students to those who are sort of qualifying into the program? Does that suggest kind of what the ratio should be, tuition versus budget? But even if it did, we still have to have a conversation as a committee about how does that extra classroom at Lynch impact the operation? And we have talked about how that current model suggests we might not need that classroom. That classroom is more an acknowledgement of the wait list, right? Which is different than students who are identifying with a general developmental delay, right? So that I would like to see as a part of that conversation as well. I had a question for you. I should have asked you this a week ago, but it just dawns on me. In the conversation about extending the school day, explicitly, I'm not clear how that affects preschool. Are we saying it's just adding 5 minutes at the beginning of the day? Because preschool doesn't end with the afternoon bell, right? It ends a little earlier. Because that could be a part of the logic around a tuition increase. I mean, at the very least, am I right? We're getting 5 more minutes in the preschool day. I'm assuming that's right.
We're getting
but it doesn't.
10.
We're getting 10.
10 minutes.
Okay, that's not clear to me explicitly that we are for preschool. But that's great if it is.
Staff is under the same collective bargaining agreement as everybody else.
Okay. So when we get to that updated school calendar, because right now your we don't have the start of the school day.
And right now, we're still in conversation with the union.
We're still in conversation. Can we just be careful to understand what that preschool
Yes, yep.
time,
Yep.
you know where I'm going
Yes,
with?
yep, absolutely.
That is a,
Right.
that is a timeframe within a larger timeframe during the day. Okay, well, that's, so it just, then, I'm trying to take a point you made earlier and suggest that's
Right.
another rationale for an increase in tuition, because we're providing more time.
Right.
I think there's also, if you look back over the prior years, this hasn't changed very much, if at all. I think at the top of that sheet, it was the same for the first 2 years and a little bit more the next year, I think.
Yeah.
So it's another rationale.
And I also think, not that we, not that our, I think that programming for students who have needs, which we go back to the discussion we had earlier with out-of-district placements and our in-district programs and special education in general, the per pupil cost for students is just higher, right?
Yep.
Because the services are more intense. So the community students who come are beneficiaries of the staffing that we probably would have anyway, although less because the numbers would be smaller, right? But, so, there's that factor too. And not to suggest that but kind of answering your question about, I'm not sure it's a straight, we've had this many community students, we have this many paying tuition students, so it's a 50-50, therefore, that kind of thing. And that's why I kind of went back to, we kind of consistently, Andrew, if you can go up on this, is it on this one? Yeah. You have one that has the ratio. This-
Yeah, I saw that on here.
Yeah, that one, right. So I can't see it, but, we kind of do hover around 25, 75. So 25 out of our tuition line and 75% out of the operating budget, or a little bit of grant funding. Is that the right ratio? Maybe. Maybe we just try to maintain that, and we try to bring that to a place where we have enough money in the budget and tuition that we're not going into a deficit year over year. Or do we try to get to 30, 70? I don't know, but.
And when you just made a comment about staffing, I just want to also say, not for this coming fiscal year, but perhaps for the next, there will be a staffing change for the preschool. We've added a new nursing suite at the new Lynch dedicated to preschool. Somebody's got to work there. Now, that may not be a 1.0 FTE, but we were there were strong cases made, were there not, for having that
Yep.
element. So
Yep.
we got to have staff there. That
Yeah,
staff
and I
doesn't
think that,
exist today.
well, in this year, as you know, currently, last year, because Lynch was not at Parkhurst, it was just the preschool, we had a full-time nurse at the preschool. This year, we've kind of gone back to the model that was when preschool was at Lynch, we had one nurse for the building, and we spent a lot of time reviewing what the needs are of the population, how many students we have. So when we look at nursing services, it's not necessarily just the FTE around per building or per total enrollment. It is really also gets down to how many students we have that have significant needs,
Yes.
medical needs that they need to have. Obviously, we'll always have 1.0 in every building. That's
Yes.
goes without saying. At the elementary level, we have more than that in middle school and high
And
school.
in some years, those can be pretty significant.
They can be. Yep.
Time-consuming needs is the way to. sort of
Well,
say it.
intense needs. I mean, yeah. Yep. So, recommendations, 5%. I'd like to extend, I think it'd be good to just set it for 3 years, so we're not having this conversation every single year, but we can have discussions, okay, what did this do for us this year, and, just kind of pace it out. I mean, I don't think we're going to be making any major corrections here. I think 5% is reasonable and gives us, some planning numbers too.
Any other questions or comments on that motion?
I make a motion to.
My brain's not working.
Yeah, I was-
My brain is slowing down, so excuse me. I make a motion to increase the preschool tuition by 5% over, or
Year over year over the next 3 years.
There you
of the
go.
next 3 years.
Yeah,
Starting,
Starting in
Beginning.
25.
in FY '20.
FY '25.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Crowdsourcing motions
It's a
is
team
always the way to
effort.
go.
Team effort at 9 o'clock.
It's totally appropriate.
Who's thinking the most right now?
So let me ask the chair of the curriculum subcommittee, because we've already covered the finance update in the budget.
Yep.
Is there a quick update?
Nope. I don't think we have another finance committee
No,
update.
no, is there a quick update for the curriculum?
Well, what I was going to ask the committee is, there's actually some things to discuss about YRBS and standards-based grading. Would you like us to delay the curriculum subcommittee update to the next meeting
After town
with,
meeting?
yes, with fresh brains? Or would you like to go forward tonight? I'm at the will of the committee.
I mean, I'd like to go forward on a non-fresh brain, but
Are you serious?
no. No.
I'm happy to do either, just
I'm
let me
sensing
know.
tired brains, but.
There's nothing urgent about the discussion.
There's nothing urgent.
And what's your sense of how much time?
We could talk for a bit about some of
Then-
them.
When I was new, we used to go to 11 o'clock, so.
I feel,
You young whippersnappers just want to.
You have no idea what it was like.
Stop
I used to
eating
walk
after
uphill,
3 hours and 10 minutes.
walk uphill to school both directions
Well,
in the
given that we're
snow.
also going into town meeting and we
Right.
won't be able to act on any of this, you do have the report in your folder, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or Dr. Ellen Emma,
Terrific.
and we can talk about those more easily at the next meeting.
Yeah, I
Excellent.
think to have I mean, it was a good curriculum subcommittee meeting.
Two, we have to update on YRBS and.
That is true.
So.
That is
yeah.
true. So I think to have a more fulsome discussion and among all of us, I think I tend to agree.
Okay.
It might be better to do it at a later date.
I'm sensing consensus of the committee. And
I think one thing I do
Yeah.
want to quickly say, though, is I want to commend the folks, specifically the folks from the district, who did an excellent job, I think, presenting on. So there were some really wonderful folks from our wonderful team of educators who did an excellent job presenting, and I think they should at least be publicly thanked for the work that they did in bringing that to the community. So.
Well, if we wait till the next meeting, we may be able to shift the subcommittee report into something. Or
That would be, yeah.
That's some foreshadowing.
perhaps.
Just to please pass along to your
Yeah, thank you.
colleagues.
Yeah. They've done
All
an
right.
amazing job.
so the next item is our future meeting dates. April 29th, pre-town meeting, May 2nd, pre-town meeting, May 6th, pre-town meeting, May 9th, pre-town meeting, May 14th, May 28th, where we have a public hearing on school choice.
Have we settled on a time for the 29th? There was some email about that today.
I think we are posted for 6, is that correct, Dr. Hackett?
I can do
posted
that.
for six.
That was
We're
the
posted for 6,
request, right?
Because town meeting starts
Yeah.
at 6:30,
6:30.
not 7.
And
Ooh,
Yes. The moderator made that change, so.
is 6 even early enough?
I think 6 is about the best we could probably do.
Yeah.
That was, so what I conveyed to Dr. Hackett today was that's given pickup logistics for a
Yes.
7 and
Yeah.
3.5.
People coming in hot, you
Even,
know.
even when they're not that age, they still pick up logistics
many
still
who
remain.
can. Just so you know.
It actually becomes less predictable, right? Because sometimes you don't need to, and then all of a sudden you get a call.
Sometimes they
Right.
take the car and then you can't go anywhere until they come home.
It's, yeah.
It's a real challenge.
But it's all hard.
Well, and town
It's
meeting
all
is, I've shared that in my capacity as a town meeting member with the moderator about the time. I understand the good reasons for moving
Yep.
it to 6:30, but it is a challenging shift, so.
So the final item on here is adjournment. We have a
Motion to
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
The second?
So moved.
All in favor? I'm taking it as a second.
Aye.
Second,
Many.
We
whatever.
are adjourned.
Erin
You-
can
you
do
may-
whatever she wants.
You
with
may
that
keep
motion.
talking if you'd like. but-